Malik smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Exactly how I thought it would. Jerome knew better than to press. He'd been driving Malik for 6 years, long enough to recognize when his boss was conducting one of his experiments. That's what Malik called them, field tests of human character under pressure. Tonight's hypothesis? Would Vivian Sterling see a person, or would she see a threat? The data was in. Home? Jerome asked. Office, Malik said. I've got work to do. Inside the Four Seasons, Vivian Sterling was already forgetting Malik's face. She'd returned to her circle of investors with a champagne flute in hand and a practiced smile on her lips. Her company, Axiom Technologies, was 11 weeks from financial collapse, and this reception was her Hail Mary, a last-ditch effort to attract Series C funding before the board forced her hand. Vivian, darling, you handled that beautifully, murmured Patricia Aldridge, a silver-haired venture capitalist whose firm had already passed on Axiom twice. Can't be too careful these days. Security is everything. Vivian accepted the praise with a gracious nod, but her attention was already elsewhere, scanning the room for Gordon Chen, the Taiwanese billionaire who'd flown in specifically for this event. Gordon was her white whale, the investor whose portfolio and connections could single-handedly save Axiom. She'd been chasing him for 8 months. Across the lobby, Vivian's executive assistant, Maya Patel, stood frozen near the registration desk, her phone clutched in both hands like a lifeline. Maya had watched the entire encounter with Malik, had seen Vivian's face twist with disgust, heard the snap of her fingers summoning security. And now Maya was staring at her phone screen, at the Google search results she'd pulled up after glimpsing Malik's name on the discarded name tag security had peeled off his shirt. Malik Rivers. Founder and CEO, Cornerstone Capital. Net worth, $4.2 billion. Primary focus, Series C and D funding for tech startups. Maya's hands started shaking. She looked up, searching the crowd for Vivian, and found her holding court near the bar, laughing at something Gordon Chen had said. Maya's first instinct was to sprint across the lobby, to grab Vivian's arm and whisper the truth before it was too late. But her feet wouldn't move. Because Maya had worked for Vivian Sterling for 3 years, and she knew that delivering this news in public would be career suicide. So Maya waited. She waited through the rest of the reception, through Vivian's endless networking, through the goodbyes and air kisses and promises to circle back next week. She waited until they were in the back of Vivian's Tesla, gliding through the nighttime streets toward Axiom's headquarters in Soma. That was productive, Vivian said, scrolling through her phone. Gordon seemed genuinely interested. I think if I can get him on a call with our CFO, Vivian, Maya interrupted. Vivian's eyes flicked up. Maya never interrupted. There's something you need to know, Maya said carefully, about the man from the lobby. Vivian's brow furrowed. The crasher? Maya's stomach clenched. He wasn't a crasher. His name is Malik Rivers. He's the CEO of Cornerstone Capital. The words hung in the air like smoke. Vivian blinked. Once. Twice. What? Malik Rivers, Maya repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. He's one of the biggest Series C investors in the Valley. His firm specializes in late-stage tech funding, net worth over $4 billion, and he was on the guest list. The color drained from Vivian's face so quickly, Maya thought she might pass out. The Tesla's autonomous driving system took a smooth left turn onto 3rd Street, and for a long moment the only sound was the electric hum of the motor. Show me, Vivian finally said. Maya handed over her phone. Vivian stared at the screen, at Malik's Forbes profile, at the photo of him in a sharp suit shaking hands with the governor of California, at the list of companies he'd funded. Companies that were now worth billions. Jesus Christ, Vivian breathed. He reached out to us 6 weeks ago, Maya said quietly, expressed interest in learning more about Axiom. His assistant coordinated with our events team to add him to tonight's list. He wanted to meet you. Vivian's mind was racing, calculating, trying to find an angle that made this anything other than catastrophic. Did anyone else see? Half the room saw Vivian, and at least a dozen people were filming. Vivian's jaw clenched. She thrust the phone back at Maya. Fix this. Call his office first thing tomorrow. Apologize. Explain there was a misunderstanding. Get me a meeting. Maya nodded, but her expression said what she didn't have the courage to speak aloud. Some things can't be fixed with a phone call. But Cornerstone Capital occupied the top 3 floors of a steel and glass tower in the financial district. At 11:47 p.m., most of the building was dark, but Malik's corner office blazed with light. He sat at his desk, a custom piece of live-edge walnut that cost more than most people's cars, reviewing pitch decks on a curved monitor the size of a windshield. His chief of staff, Simone Clark, appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. She was a black woman in her 50s who'd spent 20 years at Goldman Sachs before Malik convinced her to jump ship. She set 1 cup on his desk and settled into the chair across from him. "You went through with it," she said. It wasn't a question. Malik leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. "I did." "And?" She called security within 90 seconds. Didn't ask my name. Didn't ask what I wanted. Just saw a black man in casual clothes and decided I was a problem to be removed. Simone sipped her coffee. "You know, most billionaires just write checks to anti-racism nonprofits. You actually go out there and let people reveal themselves." "Checks are easy," Malik said. "Change is hard. And change doesn't happen until people see their own ugliness reflected back at them." "You sound like a philosophy professor." "My mother was a philosophy professor." Malik's expression softened. "She used to say that wealth reveals character, it doesn't create it. That the only difference between a poor bigot and a rich one is the scale of damage they can do." Simone set down her cup. "So what's the play here?" "Axiom Technologies," Malik said, pulling up a file on his screen. "Vivian Sterling's company. They're 11 weeks from bankruptcy, burning through cash, hemorrhaging talent, and desperate for Series C funding. Every major firm in the Valley has already passed. Because of the numbers, or because of her? Both. The tech is solid, revolutionary even, but the culture is toxic. High turnover, discrimination complaints swept under the rug, a leadership team that's 90% white and 80% male. Vivian's built a company in her own image, and it's rotting from the inside." Simone studied him. "You were actually considering funding them?" "I was. Past tense. I've been watching Axiom for 2 years. They've got a machine learning platform that could genuinely change healthcare diagnostics. 3,000 employees, partnerships with major hospital systems. If they go under, a lot of good people lose their jobs, and a lot of patients lose access to technology that could save their lives. But I needed to know if Vivian Sterling was capable of real change. And tonight, I got my answer." "Which was?" Malik's smile was sharp. "She's exactly who I thought she was." Simone was quiet for a moment. "So you're walking away?" "I'm waiting," Malik corrected. "There's a difference." "Waiting for what?" "For her to realize what she's lost. For her to understand that actions have consequences. And then, if she's willing to do the real work, not the performative PR bullshit, but the actual hard, uncomfortable work, maybe we'll talk." "That's cold, Malik." "No," he said softly. "It's necessary. Because if I just write her a check and let her keep running things the way she has been, nothing changes. She gets to stay comfortable. She gets to keep pretending that what happened tonight was just an innocent mistake. And 6 months from now, she'll do the same thing to someone else." Simone stood. "Your mother would be proud of you, and probably a little concerned." "She was always both," Malik said. "Ot." Vivian Sterling didn't sleep that night. She paced her Pacific Heights penthouse, 3,000 square feet of minimalist luxury with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, replaying the encounter in her mind, trying to find the moment where it could have gone differently, trying to convince herself that it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Malik's face, the way his expression had shifted when she recoiled from his hand. Not angry, not even surprised, just disappointed. Like he'd expected exactly this outcome, and she'd simply confirmed his hypothesis. At 6:00 a.m., Vivian gave up on sleep. She showered, dressed in her uniform of tailored black and silk, and drove to Axiom's headquarters. The building was still mostly empty. The engineers wouldn't arrive until 9, but Vivian's CFO, Richard Moss, was already in the conference room waiting for her. Richard was 62, British, and blunt in the way only longtime CFOs can be. He'd been warning Vivian about their financial situation for 6 months, and his patience was wearing thin. "We need to talk about the numbers," he said as Vivian entered. "I know what the numbers say, Richard." "Do you?" "Because we've got 77 days of runway left. 77 days before we can't make payroll, and every serious investor in Silicon Valley has already passed. We are out of options, Vivian." Vivian poured herself coffee from the carafe on the sideboard. Her hands were steady, but only because she'd had 3 years of practice hiding her fear from her executive team. "Gordon Chen is still interested. Gordon Chen is polite. There's a difference. He's not going to invest $500 million in a sinking ship just because you bought him dinner." "Then what do you suggest, Richard?" The CFO leaned back in his chair. "I suggest we start having serious conversations with acquisition targets. Google's been circling, so has Microsoft. We won't get the valuation we want, but we'll get enough to keep the team employed and the technology alive." "Absolutely not." Vivian's voice was ice. "I didn't build this company from scratch just to hand it over to some tech giant that'll bury our IP in a basement somewhere. Axiom is mine. It won't be yours for much longer if we run out of money." Before Vivian could respond, Maya appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Vivian, you need to see this." She held up her tablet. On the screen was a video, shaky phone footage from the Four Seasons reception. The angle was from across the lobby, but the audio was crystal clear. "Get security, now! This man does not belong here." The video had been posted to Twitter at 3:47 a.m. It already had 240,000 views. Vivian's coffee cup shook in her hand. "It gets worse," Maya said quietly. She scrolled down to the comments. They were brutal. Dozens of people had already identified Malik, had already done the math on what Vivian had just cost her company. At Tech Insider. Vivian Sterling just kicked out a 4B investor because he's black. Axiom is done. At VC, gossip. This is what systemic racism looks like. Sterling saw a black man in casual clothes and called security without asking a single question. At Startup News. Sources say Axiom Technologies is 11 weeks from bankruptcy. They just lost their last shot at Series C funding because their CEO is a bigot. Richard stood and walked to the window, staring out at the San Francisco skyline. "We're going to have to make a statement." "I'll handle it," Vivian said. "You'll handle it?" Richard turned, and for the first time in 3 years, Vivian saw genuine anger in his eyes. "You just humiliated a black billionaire in front of a room full of witnesses and cameras. You cost this company its last legitimate funding opportunity, and your plan is to handle it with a PR statement? What do you want me to do, Richard? Fall on my sword? Resign? I want you to fix this. Actually fix it. Not with words, but with action." "How?" Richard's laugh was bitter. "I have no idea. But I do know that if Malik Rivers doesn't fund us, Axiom Technologies will cease to exist by April, and 3,000 people will be out of work because you couldn't see past the color of someone's skin." The words hit Vivian like a physical blow. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, to explain that it had been a mistake, that she'd been stressed and distracted, but even as the excuses formed in her mind, she knew they were hollow. Because the truth, the ugly, undeniable truth, was that Richard was right. She'd seen a black man in casual clothes and made an assumption, a snap judgment based on nothing but appearance, and that assumption had just destroyed everything she'd spent a decade building. By 10 o'clock a.m., the story had gone national. Tech blogs picked it up first, then business outlets, then mainstream news. By noon, Vivian Sterling was trending on Twitter. By 2 o'clock p.m., Axiom's board of directors had called an emergency meeting. Vivian sat at the head of the conference table facing 7 stone-faced board members who'd flown in from across the country. Her chair, the power position she'd occupied for 10 years, suddenly felt like an electric chair. The board chair, Margaret Chen, no relation to Gordon, didn't waste time on pleasantries. "We've been fielding calls from investors, partners, and media outlets all morning. This situation is spiraling out of control, and we need to discuss damage mitigation." "I've prepared a statement," Vivian said, sliding printed copies across the table. A formal apology acknowledging the incident and committing to a statement isn't going to cut it, interrupted James Worthington, a white-haired former IBM executive who'd been skeptical of Vivian from day one. We're facing a full-scale crisis. Our stock price dropped 18% in pre-market trading. 3 of our hospital partners have put contracts under review, and Malik Rivers' office released a statement saying they have no plans to pursue investment opportunities with Axiom Technologies at this time. Vivian's stomach dropped. He released a statement? Maya pulled it up on the screen at the end of the conference room. Cornerstone Capital evaluates potential investments based on both financial metrics and organizational culture. Recent events have confirmed that Axiom Technologies does not align with our values regarding equity, inclusion, and leadership integrity. We will not be moving forward with funding discussions. The room was silent.
He didn't mention you by name, Margaret said quietly, which is almost worse. He's letting the video speak for itself. What are our options? Vivian asked. James leaned forward. Realistically, we have 3. 1. You resign immediately, we install interim leadership, and we hope that's enough to salvage our reputation and attract new investors. 2. You stay on but step back from public-facing roles while we bring in a crisis management team. 3. We pursue acquisition and try to get the best deal we can before our leverage completely evaporates. I'm not resigning. Then you're choosing option 2 or 3, and I'm telling you right now that option 2 is a long shot. No self-respecting investor is going to touch us while you're still at the helm. Vivian looked around the table. Not a single board member met her eyes. These were people she'd worked with for years, people she'd made wealthy through Axiom's success, and now they were already measuring her for a coffin. I can fix this, Vivian said. Give me 2 weeks. Let me reach out to Malik, apologize directly, and he won't take your call, Margaret interrupted. I already tried, on behalf of the board. His office was polite but firm. Mr. Rivers is not interested in further communication with Axiom Technologies or its leadership. The weight of those words settled over Vivian like concrete. Malik wasn't just walking away. He was slamming the door and welding it shut. There has to be something we can do, Vivian said, and she hated how her voice sounded, desperate, pleading, weak. Margaret's expression softened slightly. There might be. But it would require you to do something you've never been particularly good at. What's that? Listening. That evening, Vivian sat alone in her office long after everyone else had gone home. The San Francisco skyline glittered beyond her windows, a fortress of wealth and innovation built on the dreams of people who refused to quit. She'd always seen herself as one of them, a fighter, a visionary, someone who bent reality to her will through sheer force of determination. But tonight, for the first time in her life, Vivian Sterling felt powerless. Her phone buzzed, a text from Maya. Call from Ethan Park on your private line. Ethan Park. The name stirred something in Vivian's memory, a quiet presence in the background of her company, someone she'd passed over for promotion at least 3 times despite his consistent performance. He ran Axiom's product development division and had been with the company since the early days, back when they were working out of a converted warehouse in Oakland. Vivian picked up the phone. Ethan. Vivian. His voice was measured, careful. I wanted to reach out before you heard it from someone else. I'm getting calls from recruiters, so is half my team. People are scared, and they're starting to look for exits. Tell them to stay calm. This will blow over. Will it? Ethan's tone wasn't confrontational, just genuinely curious. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like we just lost our last chance at funding because of something that didn't have to happen. Vivian closed her eyes. Ethan, I don't need a lecture right now. I'm not lecturing you. I'm telling you what your employees are saying to each other when you're not around. They're saying this was inevitable, that the culture here has been broken for a long time, and last night was just the moment it finally got caught on camera. That's not fair, isn't it? Ethan's voice was quiet now. Vivian, I've watched you pass over qualified people of color for promotions year after year. I've watched you shut down conversations about diversity initiatives because you thought they were distractions. I've watched you build a leadership team that looks like a country club from 1985. And last night, I watched you treat a black man like a criminal because he had the audacity to approach you in casual clothes. The words stung because they were true. So what do you want me to do? Vivian asked.
I want you to actually care. Not because it's good peer or because it'll save your company, but because it's the right thing to do. And if you can't do that, Ethan paused. Then maybe you should step aside for someone who can. He hung up. Vivian sat in the darkness of her office, staring at the phone in her hand. Around her, the empire she'd built was crumbling. And for the first time, she understood that all her intelligence, all her determination, all her wealth, none of it mattered if she couldn't see the humanity in the people around her. She pulled up Malik Rivers' Forbes profile on her laptop, studied his face, read his biography, learned that he'd grown up in South Chicago, that his mother had worked 3 jobs to put him through Northwestern, that he'd built his first company in a basement apartment with 2 maxed-out credit cards and a dream that refused to die. And she realized, really realized, that when he'd extended his hand in that hotel lobby, he hadn't been testing her. He'd been giving her a chance she'd thrown away without a second thought. Vivian picked up her phone and typed a message to Maya. Book me on the first flight to New York tomorrow morning and get me the address of Cornerstone Capital's office. Maya's response came immediately. He won't see you. Vivian typed back, then I'll wait. But at 6:42 a.m. the next morning, Vivian Sterling walked into the lobby of Cornerstone Capital's New York headquarters, wearing the same clothes she'd worn on the red-eye flight from San Francisco. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no armor. Just exhaustion and something that might have been humility. The receptionist, a young black woman with natural hair and kind eyes, looked up from her computer. Can I help you? I need to see Malik Rivers. Do you have an appointment? No. I'm sorry, but Mr. Rivers doesn't take unscheduled meetings. If you'd like to submit a request through our website, my name is Vivian Sterling. I'm the CEO of Axiom Technologies, and I'm not leaving until he agrees to see me. The receptionist's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, recognition, maybe, or pity. I'll let his office know you're here, but I can't make any promises. Thank you. Vivian settled into one of the leather chairs in the waiting area. Around her, Cornerstone Capital's lobby hummed with quiet efficiency, executives coming and going, phones ringing, the soft ping of elevator arrivals. She watched people glance at her, watched them lean close to each other and whisper. Some pulled out their phones. By noon, Vivian's presence in the lobby had been tweeted about 37 times. By 3:00 p.m., a Bloomberg reporter had shown up and tried to interview her. Vivian declined. By 5:00 p.m., her legs were cramping and her stomach was eating itself, but she didn't move. At 6:15 p.m., the elevator doors opened and Simone Clark stepped out. She crossed the lobby with the unhurried confidence of someone who held all the cards and stopped in front of Vivian's chair. Ms. Sterling, Vivian stood. I need to speak with Malik. So I've heard. You've been here for 11 hours. I'll stay for 11 more if that's what it takes. Simone studied her for a long moment. Why? Because I owe him an apology. A real one, face to face. You could have done that through email, or a phone call, or a very expensive PR firm. No, Vivian said quietly. I couldn't. Because this isn't about damage control. It's about acknowledging what I did and understanding why it was wrong. And I can't do that through a screen. Simone's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Follow me. They took the elevator to the 42nd floor in silence. The doors opened onto a hallway lined with conference rooms, each named after a city Malik had lived in: Chicago, Boston, London, Tokyo. Simone led Vivian to the smallest room, a windowless box with a table barely big enough for 4 people. Wait here, Simone said and closed the door. Vivian sat. The room was aggressively neutral. Gray walls, no art, no personality, a space designed for uncomfortable conversations. 15 minutes passed. Then the door opened and Malik Rivers walked in. He looked exactly as he had at the Four Seasons: navy polo, dark jeans, expensive watch. But his expression was different. At the hotel he'd been open, friendly, willing to give her a chance. Now he was armored, closed off, a fortress with the drawbridge up. He sat across from her and folded his hands on the table. You have 15 minutes, he said. Vivian took a breath. I'm sorry. Malik waited. I'm sorry for how I treated you, for the assumptions I made, for calling security, for... Stop. Vivian's mouth snapped shut. Malik leaned forward. Do you know why I went to that reception? You wanted to meet me. I wanted to see if you were capable of change. If the reports I'd been hearing about Axiom's culture were accurate, or if they were just disgruntled employees blowing off steam. His voice was calm, measured, devastating. I wore casual clothes on purpose. I approached you without scheduling a formal introduction. I gave you every opportunity to see me as a person, to ask questions, to engage with curiosity instead of fear. I know. And I failed. You didn't just fail, Malik said quietly. You revealed exactly who you are. You saw a black man in jeans and immediately decided I was a threat. You didn't ask my name. You didn't ask what I wanted. You just saw someone who didn't look like you thought they should, and you had me removed like trash. Tears burned behind Vivian's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. You're right. Everything you're saying is right, and I have no excuse for it. I don't want your excuses. I want to know if you understand the real problem here. The problem is that I'm a racist. No. Malik's voice hardened. The problem is that you've built an entire company on those same reflexes and assumptions. Axiom's leadership is 90% white. Your board has no black members. Your last 3 diversity hires left within 18 months because they couldn't break through your inner circle. You've created an organization that mirrors your own blind spots, and it's rotting from the inside. Vivian's hand shook in her lap. How do I fix it? Malik stood. You don't. Not overnight. Real change takes years of uncomfortable work. And I don't think you have years. Your company will be bankrupt in 77 days, and no investor in their right mind is going to fund an organization led by someone who became a national symbol of workplace discrimination. Then why did you agree to see me? Malik walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. Because I wanted to look you in the eye and tell you that actions have consequences. That you can't build an empire on exclusion and expect it to stand, and that when you treat people like they don't matter, eventually the world stops treating you like you do. He opened the door. Malik, wait. He looked back. Vivian's voice cracked. I have 3,000 employees, good people who did nothing wrong. If Axiom goes under, they lose everything, their jobs, their healthcare, their stock options. I'm begging you, not for me, for them. Please. Malik was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a single folded piece of paper, and set it on the table. Read that. If you can do everything it says, and I mean everything, publicly, with full accountability, call my office in 3 days. If not, accept your fate and start helping your employees find new jobs. He left. Vivian stared at the paper like it might burn her if she touched it. Finally, she unfolded it. The terms were typed in clean, merciless bullet points. And as Vivian read them, she understood that Malik Rivers wasn't offering her salvation. He was offering her a chance to earn it. The paper trembled in Vivian's hands as she read through Malik's terms for the 3rd time. The conference room felt smaller with each passing second, the gray walls pressing in like a vice. She'd expected conditions, maybe a public apology, perhaps mandatory diversity training for her leadership team. What Malik was demanding was nothing short of complete corporate dismemberment and reconstruction. Term 1. Public accountability. Within 72 hours, hold a press conference admitting to racial profiling and systemic bias within Axiom Technologies' organizational culture. No prepared statements written by PR teams. Speak from genuine understanding or don't speak at all. Vivian's throat constricted. A press conference meant facing cameras, reporters, the viral mob that was already sharpening their knives on Twitter. It meant admitting fault not just privately, but in a way that would be recorded, archived, replayed forever. Term 2. Independent cultural audit. Retain a third-party firm specializing in organizational equity to conduct a comprehensive 6-month investigation of Axiom's hiring practices, promotion patterns, compensation structures, and workplace culture. All findings must be made public, with no redactions except where legally required. 6 months of strangers combing through every personnel file, every email chain, every complaint that had been quietly dismissed or buried. Every skeleton would come tumbling out of every closet. Vivian thought of the HR report she'd skimmed and filed away, the warnings she'd ignored because the accused were high performers, the uncomfortable conversations she'd shut down because they felt like distractions from growth metrics. Term 3. Leadership restructuring. Remove yourself from the CEO position. Transition to a non-executive advisory role with no operational authority. Board to select new leadership from within existing personnel, with priority given to candidates from underrepresented backgrounds who demonstrate both competence and cultural understanding. Vivian's vision blurred. This was the kill shot. Malik wasn't just asking her to apologize or reform, he was asking her to abdicate, to hand over the throne she'd fought for, bled for, sacrificed everything to build. 10 years of her life distilled into a single demand: step down. Term 4. Measurable transformation. Establish concrete diversity targets across all levels of the organization within 12 months. Minimum 30% representation of people of color in leadership positions, mandatory bias training for all employees, including executive team, creation of employee resource groups with real budgets and board-level sponsors. Progress reports submitted quarterly to Cornerstone Capital with full transparency. Term 5. Personal accountability. Donate $5 million from personal assets to organizations focused on racial equity in tech. Publicly disclose the donation with explanation of why this specific act of restitution is necessary. $5 million. Vivian did the mental math instantly. It was roughly 20% of her liquid net worth. Money she'd planned to use for her next venture, her safety net, her proof that she'd made it. Malek was asking her to bleed. Term 6. Ongoing partnership. Accept Cornerstone Capital representation on Axiom's board with veto power over key personnel and cultural decisions. Submit to annual reviews of progress on equity initiatives. Any regression or evidence of performative rather than genuine change results in immediate withdrawal of funding. Vivian folded the paper and pressed it against her forehead, eyes closed. The overhead fluorescents hummed their mechanical song. Somewhere beyond these walls, New York City roared with evening traffic and human ambition. And here she sat, holding a document that could save her company or destroy her ego, and being forced to choose between them. Her phone buzzed. A text from Richard. Board meeting in 90 minutes. They're voting on forced sale to Microsoft. Get back here now. Vivian stood so fast the chair scraped against the floor. She grabbed the paper, shoved it in her bag, and ran. The lobby was mostly empty when she burst from the elevator. The receptionist looked up in surprise as Vivian sprinted past, already pulling up her phone to book the next flight back to San Francisco. She made it to the street and thrust her arm in the air, flagging down a yellow cab with the desperation of someone who'd just realized they were late to their own funeral. JFK, she gasped as she threw herself into the back seat. And I'll pay double if you get me there in 30 minutes. The driver, a Sikh man with a turban and an expression that said he'd seen everything, glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Lady, it's rush hour. Best I can do is 45. Then drive like you're late for your own wedding. He shrugged and punched the accelerator. Vivian used the ride to make calls, first to Maya, who answered on the first ring. Where are you? New York, coming back. I need you to do something for me. Vivian, the board is... I know what the board is doing. Listen to me. I need you to schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Send invites to every major tech publication, business outlet, and local news station. I'm making a statement. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, what kind of statement? The kind that either saves this company or buries me. Maybe both. Vivian, you can't just... Maya. Vivian's voice dropped to something raw and honest. I saw him. I spoke with Malik, and he gave me a way forward, but it requires me to do something I've never done before. What's that? Tell the truth, the whole ugly truth, and accept the consequences. Another pause. I'll make the calls. Next, Vivian dialed Margaret Chen's direct line. The board chair answered with ice in her voice. You have exactly 3 minutes before we start the vote, and I'm telling you now that it's not looking good for your side. Don't vote yet. I'm on my way back from New York. I met with Malik Rivers. The ice cracked slightly. He saw you. He did, and he gave me terms for funding, but they're extensive. I need time to present them to the board before you make any decisions about selling.
Vivian, we don't have time. Microsoft's offer is good for 48 hours. If we don't move now, 24 hours. Vivian interrupted. Give me 24 hours to show you there's another path. If you still want to sell after that, I won't fight you. Margaret exhaled slowly. I'll delay the vote until tomorrow evening, but that's all I can give you.
And Vivian, whatever Malik's terms are, I hope you understand that the board's first priority is the employees and shareholders, not your pride. I understand. The call ended. The cab merged onto the expressway, weaving through traffic with impressive aggression. Vivian leaned her head against the window and watched the city blur past. For 10 years, she'd been the protagonist of her own story, the brilliant founder, the disruptive innovator, the woman who refused to take no for an answer. She'd seen herself as a fighter, breaking down barriers and building something revolutionary. But maybe she'd been the villain all along and just couldn't see it. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ms. Sterling? The voice was young, female, uncertain. Yes? My name is Jennifer Washington. I used to work at Axiom. I was a senior software engineer until I resigned 8 months ago. Vivian's stomach dropped. I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of... I know you're busy. I saw the news about what happened at the Four Seasons, and I saw that you flew to New York to see Malik Rivers. Jennifer's voice steadied. I'm calling because I want you to know why I left Axiom, and I want you to know that what happened with Malik wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern. Vivian closed her eyes. Go ahead. I was hired because you needed to improve your diversity numbers for a funding round. I was good at my job, really good. I had 3 patents to my name and a CS degree from MIT, but from day one I was treated like a diversity checkbox instead of an engineer. My ideas were dismissed in meetings. I was interrupted constantly. Twice I was asked to take notes, even though I was the senior person in the room. And when I applied for a team lead position, I was told I needed more experience, then watched you promote a white guy who'd been there half as long. Jennifer, I'm not done. When I filed a complaint with HR, nothing happened. When I tried to talk to you directly, your assistant told me you were too busy. When I finally resigned, you know what your exit interview response was? We're sorry to see you go, but we understand that Axiom's fast-paced culture isn't for everyone. Like I was the problem. Like I just couldn't handle the pressure. Vivian's throat was tight. I'm sorry. Are you? Because 8 months ago, an apology would have meant something. It would have meant I could stay at the company I helped build. But now it just sounds like damage control. It's not. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to save your company, and maybe that's the right move. Axiom's technology matters, and the people who still work there deserve stability. But if you're going to do this, if you're actually going to change things, you need to understand that it's not about policies or programs. It's about seeing people like me as human beings instead of problems to be managed. I hear you, Vivian said quietly. Do you? Because I've been watching tech companies make promises about diversity for years, and most of them are just performance. They hire a bunch of people of color, parade them around in marketing materials, and then create cultures so toxic that everyone quits within 2 years. The numbers look good on paper, but nothing actually changes. How do I make real change? Jennifer laughed, but there was no humor in it. You start by listening to the people you've been ignoring. You elevate voices that make you uncomfortable. You fire the people who create hostile environments, even when they're high performers. You build systems that actually protect marginalized employees instead of protecting the company's reputation. And most importantly, you accept that this work is never finished. It's not a project with a completion date. It's a fundamental shift in how you see the world. The cab pulled up to the terminal. Vivian handed the driver a $100 bill and told him to keep the change. Jennifer, I know I don't deserve it, but would you be willing to talk with me again after I've had time to actually implement changes? I'd like to understand more about your experience and hear your thoughts on what Axiom should do differently. Maybe. If you prove you're serious, but I'm not holding my breath. The line went dead. Vivian made it through security and onto her flight with 5 minutes to spare. She collapsed into her first-class seat and pulled out Malik's terms again, reading them with new eyes. Each demand wasn't just a checkbox to secure funding, It was a scalpel, designed to cut out the rot she'd spent years pretending didn't exist. The plane lifted off, and San Francisco grew smaller below her. Somewhere down there was Axiom headquarters, where 3,000 people were waiting to learn if they'd still have jobs next month. Somewhere down there was a board of directors preparing to sell her company out from under her. And somewhere down there was the possibility of redemption if she was brave enough to reach for it. The flight attendant brought her a drink she didn't remember ordering. Vivian stared at the amber liquid and thought about her father. He'd built a successful real estate empire in Connecticut through what he called smart networking, which really meant only doing business with people who looked like him, talked like him, came from the same country clubs and prep schools. He'd taught Vivian that success meant surrounding yourself with people who understood how things work, people who wouldn't challenge you or slow you down with uncomfortable questions. She'd built Axiom exactly the same way, and now it was crumbling. Vivian pulled out her laptop and opened a blank document. If she was going to do this press conference, if she was actually going to stand in front of cameras and admit to racial profiling and systemic bias, she needed to understand what she was confessing to, not as an abstract concept, but as concrete harm done to real people. She started typing, not a PR statement, but a list. Names she remembered, moments she'd dismissed, decisions she'd justified. Jennifer Washington, software engineer, asked her to take notes in a meeting where she was the senior technical lead. Never questioned why I assumed that role should go to her. Marcus Johnson, product manager, hired with great fanfare, resigned after 14 months. Exit interview mentioned cultural fit issues. I never followed up. Dr. Ethan Park, passed over for VP of product 3 times despite consistent performance reviews. Each time I promoted someone less qualified but more aligned with company vision. Never examined what that phrase actually meant. Informal leadership team, all white, all people I felt comfortable with. Never asked why comfort mattered more than competence or perspective. The list grew. With each entry, Vivian felt something inside her chest cracking open, not breaking, but opening. Like a door she'd kept locked because she was afraid of what might be behind it. Her phone buzzed with a message from Simone Clark. Mr. Rivers asked me to send you something. A moment later, a video file appeared. Vivian hesitated, then pressed play. The footage was from a security camera, black and white, dated 3 years earlier. It showed the lobby of what looked like a venture capital office. A young black woman in professional attire approached the reception desk, spoke to someone off camera, then waited, and waited, and waited. 45 minutes passed in time-lapse. Other people came and went, all white, all greeted immediately, all ushered upstairs. The young woman kept waiting. Finally, a white man in a suit appeared, spoke to her briefly, and she was sent upstairs. The timestamp showed she'd been sitting there for nearly an hour past her scheduled appointment time. A text from Simone followed. That's me, 15 years ago. First VC meeting of my career. I had an MBA from Wharton and 5 years at Goldman Sachs. They made me wait because they assumed I was there for an admin interview, not a partner pitch. The firm later apologized and blamed it on a scheduling mix-up. But I knew the truth. And so do you. The message continued. Malik sends these videos to everyone he's considering for investment. He wants you to understand that what happened at the Four Seasons wasn't an anomaly. It's a pattern that plays out thousands of times a day, in lobbies and boardrooms and hiring committees across this country. The question isn't whether you're a bad person. The question is whether you're willing to see the system you've been perpetuating and actually dismantle it. Vivian watched the video again. Watched Simone, brilliant, accomplished Simone, being rendered invisible by assumptions and bias. And she thought about all the times she'd made people wait, made people prove themselves, made people work twice as hard for half the recognition because some unconscious part of her brain had decided they didn't quite belong. The plane began its descent into San Francisco. The city appeared below, a circuit board of lights and ambition. Vivian saved her document, closed her laptop, and made a decision. She was going to do it, all of it, every single term Malik had demanded, no matter how much it cost her. Not because she'd suddenly become a saint, not because she'd experienced some magical transformation, but because for the first time in her life, she could see the harm she'd caused clearly enough to understand that the only path forward was through complete accountability. The cab ride from the airport to Axiom headquarters took 30 minutes. It was almost midnight when Vivian walked through the empty lobby and took the elevator to the executive floor. The lights in the conference room were still on. She pushed open the door to find her entire board of directors waiting, along with Richard and Maya. They looked exhausted, angry, and resigned. Margaret stood. "We delayed the vote like you asked. Now tell us why we shouldn't accept Microsoft's offer and save ourselves the embarrassment of a public implosion." Vivian set her bag on the table and pulled out Malik's terms. "Because I have a better option. Malik Rivers has agreed to provide Series C funding under specific conditions." James Worthington grabbed the paper and started reading. His expression darkened with each line. "Are you insane? He wants you to resign as CEO. He wants a full cultural audit with public disclosure. He looked up, face red. "This isn't a funding agreement. It's corporate suicide." "No," Vivian said calmly. "It's accountability. And it's the only way forward that doesn't involve selling our technology to a company that will bury it and laying off 1,500 people." Margaret took the paper from James and read it herself. "Vivian, even if we agreed to these terms, you're asking us to air every piece of dirty laundry we have, every discrimination complaint, every pay disparity, every mistake we've made. The lawsuits alone could destroy us." They could. Or they could show that we're serious about change, that we're willing to be transparent about our failures because we're committed to doing better. "And you're willing to step down as CEO?" This from Richard, his British accent making the question sound even more skeptical. "I am." The room fell silent. Finally, Ethan Park, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up. "I'd like to say something, if that's okay." Margaret nodded. Ethan stood. "I've worked at this company for 7 years. I've watched us build incredible technology. I've also watched us create a culture where people like me are tolerated but not truly valued, where we're hired to fill diversity quotas but not promoted to leadership, where our ideas are credited to others and our concerns are dismissed." He looked at Vivian. "What happened at the Four Seasons was ugly, but it was also clarifying. It made visible something that's been invisible for too long." "What's your point?" James asked. "My point is that Microsoft doesn't care about fixing our culture. They care about acquiring our IP. If we sell, the technology survives, but the problem moves somewhere else, infects another organization. But if we do this, if we actually commit to the work Malik is demanding, we have a chance to build something that matters beyond just the product." "That's very idealistic," James said. "But idealism doesn't pay salaries." "Neither does bankruptcy," Ethan replied. "And that's where we're headed if we don't take Malik's offer." Margaret set down the paper and looked at Vivian. "If we agree to this, you understand what it means? You'll lose your position. Your reputation will take a massive hit. You'll be defined by this mistake for the rest of your career." "I know." "And you're still willing to do it?" Vivian thought about Jennifer Washington, about Simone Clark's 45-minute wait, about Malik's expression when she'd recoiled from his hand. She thought about all the people she'd dismissed and overlooked and failed to see. "I'm willing," she said, "because the alternative is worse. The alternative is letting 3,000 people lose their jobs because I was too proud to admit I was wrong." Margaret looked around the table. All in favor of accepting Malik Rivers' terms and moving forward with the funding agreement. One by one, hands went up. Even James, though he looked like it physically pained him. "Motion carries," Margaret said. "Vivian, you have 72 hours to hold that press conference. And may whatever higher power you believe in have mercy on you, because the media certainly won't." The meeting adjourned at 1:30 a.m. Vivian stood alone in the conference room, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. In 72 hours, she would stand in front of cameras and destroy the carefully constructed image she'd spent a decade building. She would admit to racial profiling, to systemic bias, to creating a culture that valued comfort over competence, and then she would step down from the company she'd built with her own hands. Her phone buzzed. A message from Malik. "Simone tells me you watched the video. Tomorrow morning, someone from our legal team will contact you to begin drafting the funding agreement. The 72-hour clock starts now. Don't waste it." Vivian typed back, "Thank you for giving me this chance." His response came immediately. "I'm not giving you a chance. I'm holding you accountable. There's a difference. Use the next 3 days to figure out what that means. She pocketed her phone and headed for the elevator. On the ride down, she caught her reflection in the polished steel doors. She looked older than she had a week ago, tired, scared, but maybe, finally, awake. The lobby was empty except for the night security guard, an older black man named William, who'd worked at Axiom since they'd moved into this building. He nodded as Vivian passed. She stopped. "William, can I ask you something?" He looked surprised. "Of course, Ms. Sterling. In all the years you've worked here, have I ever asked your opinion on anything? Have I ever actually seen you as anything other than part of the building?" William was quiet for a moment, then gently, "No, ma'am, you haven't. I'm sorry for that." He studied her face, looking for the angle, the manipulation, finding only exhaustion and something that might have been sincerity. "If you mean it," he said slowly, "then tomorrow's a good day to start showing it." Vivian nodded and walked out into the San Francisco night. The city was quieter now, the ambitious and the desperate having retreated to their homes and high-rises. Somewhere in this city, 3,000 Axiom employees were sleeping, unaware that their CEO had just agreed to commit professional suicide to save their jobs. And somewhere in New York, Malik Rivers was probably awake, watching to see if Vivian Sterling would actually follow through or collapse under the weight of her own ego. She pulled out her phone and called Maya. "I need you to write something down. Tomorrow morning, before the press conference, I want to meet with every person of color currently employed at Axiom. No executive team, no PR handlers, just me and them. And I want to listen." "Vivian, that's nearly 400 people. Then we'll need a big room. Make it happen." "What are you going to say to them?" Vivian looked up at the Axiom building, at the logo she'd designed, at the empire she was about to dismantle. "The truth. All of it. And then I'm going to ask them what real change looks like, because clearly, I don't know." She hung up and started walking. The press conference was in 68 hours. She had work to do. The conference room on Axiom's third floor could hold 500 people when the movable walls were pulled back. At 8 o'clock the next morning, it held 372 employees, and the air was thick with suspicion. Vivian stood at the front without a podium, without notes, without the armor of prepared remarks. Maya had set up a single microphone on a stand, and the fluorescent lights overhead felt like an interrogation lamp. The employees filed in slowly, exchanging glances, whispering to each other. Some Vivian recognized from hallway passings or all-hands meetings where she'd delivered polished speeches about growth metrics and market disruption. Most were strangers whose names she'd never learned, whose contributions she'd never acknowledged, whose presence in her company had been as invisible to her as air. Dr. Ethan Park stood near the back wall, arms crossed, watching. Next to him was Keisha Matthews, a product designer Vivian had hired 2 years ago after a recruiter had told her the optics would be good. Keisha had won an industry award last month, and Vivian had sent a congratulatory email written by Maya. She'd never actually spoken to the woman. When the last person entered and the doors closed, the room fell silent. 372 pairs of eyes locked onto Vivian Sterling, and she felt the weight of every assumption she'd ever made, every opportunity she'd denied, every complaint she'd dismissed. "Thank you for coming," Vivian began, and her voice cracked on the second word. She cleared her throat. "I'm sure you've all seen the video from the 4 seasons. You know what I did. You know that I humiliated a black billionaire investor because I made assumptions based on the color of his skin and what he was wearing." Nobody moved. The silence was surgical. "What you might not know is that Malik Rivers has offered to fund our Series C round, the money that will keep this company alive and keep all of you employed. But his terms include something I should have done years ago, which is to actually listen to the people I've been failing." Vivian's hands shook, so she gripped the microphone stand. "I asked you here because I need to understand the harm I've caused, not so I can craft a better apology or manage the PR damage, but because I genuinely don't know. I've been running this company for 10 years and I've been blind the entire time." A hand went up near the front, a young South Asian woman in a purple hijab. "Can I ask a question?" "Please." "Why should we believe this isn't just performance? Why should we think you actually care about our experiences instead of just caring about saving your company? The question hung in the air like smoke. Vivian could have deflected, could have given a politician's answer about genuine commitment and learning journeys. Instead, she said, "You shouldn't believe me. I haven't earned your trust, and words are cheap. The only way I can prove this is real is through action over time. But I'm hoping you'll give me the chance to start." Another hand. A black man in his 40s wearing a Stanford hoodie. "I'm Marcus Chen, infrastructure team. I've been here for 4 years. In that time, I've applied for 3 different management positions and been rejected for all of them. Each time, someone with less experience got promoted. Each time, I was told I needed to demonstrate more leadership potential. When I asked for specific examples of what that meant, I never got a straight answer. Can you tell me now what leadership potential actually means?" Vivian felt like she'd been punched. "I can't, because I don't think it meant anything concrete. I think it was code for someone who looked and acted like the leaders I was already comfortable with." Marcus nodded slowly. "At least you're honest." A woman in the middle section stood without being called on. She was petite, Latina, maybe 30 years old. "I'm Sofia Ramirez. I work in legal. Last year, I reported a senior engineer for making racist comments about my accent. HR investigated and found the complaints unsubstantiated because there were no witnesses willing to go on record. The engineer is still here. I'm the one who got transferred to a different team. Do you know about that case?" Vivian's stomach turned to ice. "No, I don't." "That's the problem, isn't it? You built systems that protected the company instead of protecting us. And now you're asking us to believe those systems are going to change because you got caught on camera doing what you've been doing in private for years." "You're right." Vivian's voice was barely above a whisper. "And I don't have a good answer except that I'm committing to tearing down those systems and building new ones. With input from people like you. With accountability measures that actually mean something." Ethan Park finally spoke from the back. "What does accountability look like to you, Vivian?" She turned to face him. "It looks like stepping down as CEO. It looks like bringing in independent auditors to examine every policy, every hiring decision, every promotion over the past 5 years. It looks like making those findings public even when they make me look terrible. It looks like establishing actual consequences for discrimination instead of sweeping it under the rug. And it looks like elevating people like you into leadership positions, because clearly my judgment has been compromised by my own bias." The room stirred. People leaned forward. "You're actually stepping down?" someone called out. "Yes. As part of the funding agreement with Malik Rivers, I'm transitioning to a non-executive advisory role. The board will select a new CEO from within the company, with preference given to candidates who can actually lead us through cultural transformation instead of perpetuating the status quo." Keisha Matthews raised her hand. "Who decides what that transformation looks like? Because if it's the same board that let this culture fester for 10 years, I don't have a lot of faith in the outcome." "That's fair," Vivian said. "The funding agreement includes third-party oversight and quarterly progress reports to Cornerstone Capital. Malik Rivers will have board representation with veto power over key personnel decisions, so it won't just be us grading our own homework." A young black woman near the front spoke up, her voice quiet but steady. "I'm Amber Johnson. I've been here 8 months. I'm one of 3 black women in engineering. Do you know what it's like to walk into a meeting and be the only person who looks like me? To have people assume I'm lost when I'm looking for the conference room? To hear colleagues make jokes about affirmative action and know they're talking about me?" Vivian shook her head. "I can't know what that's like. I've never experienced it." "No, you've caused it. You and every leader who hired people like me to check a box and then created an environment where we're tolerated but not valued, where we're visible enough for the diversity reports but invisible enough that nobody notices when we leave." Amber's eyes were wet. "I got a job offer from Google yesterday. Better pay, better title. I was going to accept it. The only reason I'm still here is because I want to see if you're actually serious. Because if Axiom can change, if a company this broken can actually transform, then maybe there's hope for the rest of the industry." The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples through the room. Vivian saw people nodding, saw the same exhausted hope reflected in dozens of faces. They wanted to believe change was possible,
but they'd been disappointed too many times to trust easily. For the next 2 hours, Vivian listened. She heard about microaggressions that accumulated like paper cuts until people bled out and quit. She heard about promotions denied, ideas stolen, contributions erased. She heard about the employee resource group that had been formed 3 years ago and then systematically defunded and ignored. She heard about exit interviews where people told the truth and nothing changed. She heard about the unwritten rules that governed who got access to Vivian, who got invited to strategy meetings, who got credit for success, and who got blamed for failure. And through it all, Vivian stood and absorbed it without defending herself, without making excuses, without checking her watch. When someone's voice broke with emotion, she waited. When someone's anger turned sharp, she didn't flinch. When someone asked if she had any idea how much damage she'd done, she said no, but she was beginning to understand. At 10 o'clock, Maya appeared at the door and gestured urgently. The press conference was scheduled for noon, and Vivian needed to prepare. But she held up a hand. "I know we're running out of time," she told the room. "But before I go, I want to ask you something. If you could wave a magic wand and fix one thing about this company, one policy, one practice, one cultural norm, what would it be?" The answers came rapid fire. Anonymous reporting systems with real teeth, compensation audits to eliminate pay disparities, mandatory bias training that wasn't just a checkbox exercise, diverse interview panels for every hire, exit interview data published quarterly, employee resource groups with actual budgets and executive sponsors, a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination that applied to high performers and executives, not just junior staff, regular culture surveys with transparent results and action plans. Vivian's assistant was frantically typing notes on her laptop. When the suggestions finally slowed, Vivian said, "I'm writing all of this down, and I'm committing to you that these won't just be nice ideas that get discussed in a committee and then forgotten. They'll be part of the accountability framework I'm building with Malik's team, and every quarter, I'll report back to you on progress." "You won't be CEO," someone pointed out. "How can you make those commitments?" "You're right, I can't make them alone, but I can use whatever influence I have left to push for them, and I can make sure the next CEO understands that this is non-negotiable." Ethan stepped forward. "I have a suggestion for who that next CEO should be." The room turned to look at him. "It should be someone who's been here long enough to understand the business, but hasn't been part of the toxic leadership culture. Someone who's demonstrated both technical competence and emotional intelligence. Someone from an underrepresented background who can bring a different perspective to the role." He paused. "I'm not volunteering myself, but I am saying that we have people in this room who could do the job better than anyone we'd hire from outside." Vivian met his eyes. "I agree, and I'll make sure the board knows that." She thanked them for their time and honesty, promised this was just the beginning of a longer conversation, and left the room with her heart hammering. Maya was waiting in the hallway with a panic attack brewing. "You have 90 minutes before the press conference," Maya said, walking fast to keep up with Vivian's stride. "We need to go over your remarks, do a mic check, brief you on the reporters who'll be there. I'm not using remarks." Maya stopped dead. "Vivian, you can't just wing this. Do you have any idea how many ways this can go wrong? One misstep, one poorly chosen word, and you'll make everything worse. I spent 2 hours listening to people tell me about the harm I've caused. I know exactly how bad this is, and the worst thing I could do right now is stand up there and deliver some polished statement written by a PR team. This has to be real. Real can be messy. Good. It should be messy. I've been hiding behind polish and performance for 10 years. It's time to stop." They took the elevator to the executive floor. In Vivian's office, Richard was waiting with the preliminary funding documents from Malik's legal team. He looked like he hadn't slept. "We need to go through these before you sign anything," he said, spreading papers across her desk. "There are some provisions in here that concern me, specifically the quarterly reporting requirements and the board oversight clauses. We're essentially giving Malik veto power over major decisions." "That's correct." "Vivian, as your CFO, I have to advise against ceding that much control. It sets a dangerous precedent." "Richard, as my CFO, you've been telling me for months that we're about to run out of money. This is the only funding offer we have, and frankly, given what I've learned over the past 24 hours,
Maybe we need someone with veto power. Maybe we need external accountability because we've proven we can't police ourselves. Richard sighed and removed his glasses to rub his eyes. I've worked with you for 7 years. I've never seen you like this. Like what? Humble. It's unsettling. Despite everything, Vivian almost smiled. Get used to it. I have a feeling I'm going to be eating a lot of humble pie in the coming months. Her phone buzzed. A message from Simone Clark. Malik is watching the live stream of your press conference. Don't perform, tell the truth. Vivian showed the message to Maya. How many media outlets are coming? 43 confirmed, plus live stream coverage from TechCrunch, Bloomberg, and CNBC. Estimated viewing audience in the hundreds of thousands. Maya's voice was tight. Vivian, this is career-defining. Once you say these things publicly, there's no taking them back. Your name will be associated with this forever. I know. And you're still doing it? Vivian thought about Amber Johnson, 25 years old and already exhausted from fighting to be seen. She thought about Jennifer Washington, forced out of a company she'd helped build. She thought about Malik's hand extended in the Four Seasons lobby and the disgust that had flashed across her own face. I'm still doing it, she said. At 11:45 a.m., Vivian walked into the press room Axiom used for product launches and investor updates. 43 journalists sat in neat rows, cameras on tripods, voice recorders ready. The room smelled like coffee and predatory anticipation. These people weren't here to cover a tech announcement. They were here to watch a public execution, and Vivian was providing the rope. Maya did a final microphone check. Richard stood near the side door, arms crossed, looking like a man watching a car crash in slow motion. And somewhere in New York, Malik Rivers was settling in to watch whether Vivian Sterling would actually follow through or collapse under pressure. At exactly noon, Vivian stepped up to the microphone. No podium, no notes, no safety net. Just her and the truth, broadcast live to anyone who wanted to watch. Thank you for coming, she began, and her voice only shook a little. 4 days ago, I attended an investor reception at the Four Seasons Hotel. A black man approached me and extended his hand to introduce himself. I recoiled from his hand like it was a threat. I called security and had him removed from the event. That man was Malik Rivers, a billionaire investor who'd come specifically to meet me and potentially fund my company. The cameras clicked and whirred. The journalist leaned forward. I've spent the past 4 days trying to understand how I could do something so blatantly racist. And the truth I've come to is this. What happened at the Four Seasons wasn't an aberration. It was a revelation. It revealed biases I've been carrying my entire life, assumptions I've been making about who belongs in professional spaces and who doesn't, judgments based on appearance, on skin color, on whether someone looks like the version of success I've been conditioned to recognize. Vivian gripped the sides of the podium that wasn't there, then realized her hands were empty and forced them to her sides. I built Axiom Technologies to disrupt healthcare diagnostics. I believed I was building something revolutionary, something that would help people. But what I actually built was a culture that replicated my own blind spots and biases. A leadership team that's 90% white. A promotion system that favors people who look and sound like me. A workplace where employees of color are hired to improve our diversity metrics, but then systematically excluded from real power and opportunity. A reporter in the front row, Vivian recognized her from the Wall Street Journal, was taking notes so fast her pen was almost a blur. This morning, I met with nearly 400 employees of color from Axiom. I asked them to tell me about their experiences working at my company. What I heard was devastating. Stories of discrimination, of microaggressions, of being passed over for promotions despite superior qualifications. Stories of reporting harassment and being punished for it while the harassers faced no consequences. Stories of exhaustion from fighting to be seen and valued in an organization that treated them as diversity checkboxes instead of human beings. Vivian's throat tightened, but she pushed through. I want to be clear about something. I'm not a victim here. I'm not the person who deserves sympathy or understanding. The people I've harmed through my leadership, the people who've left Axiom because they couldn't take the toxic culture anymore, the people who stayed and suffered through it, those are the people who deserve to be centered in this conversation. Not me. She paused, took a breath, and delivered the words that would define the rest of her career. As part of securing Series C funding from Malik Rivers' firm, I've agreed to step down as CEO of Axiom Technologies. The board will select new leadership from within the company, with preference given to candidates from underrepresented backgrounds who can actually lead cultural transformation. I'm also committing to a comprehensive third-party audit of our hiring practices, compensation structures, and workplace culture, with all findings made public. I'm personally donating $5 million to organizations focused on racial equity in tech, and I'm accepting ongoing oversight from Cornerstone Capital to ensure these changes are real and lasting, not performative. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions over each other. Cameras flashed. Someone knocked over a coffee cup. Maya looked like she might faint. Vivian held up a hand. "I'll take a few questions." The Wall Street Journal reporter stood. "Ms. Sterling, critics might say this is just damage control, that you're only making these changes because you got caught on camera. How do you respond?" They'd be right. If that video hadn't gone viral, I probably would have continued running Axiom the same way I have been, blind to the harm I was causing. The fact that it took public humiliation to open my eyes is itself an indictment of my character and leadership. I don't get credit for doing the bare minimum after being forced to confront my own racism. Another reporter. "Do you believe you're a racist?" Vivian didn't hesitate. "Yes. Not in the sense of actively hating people because of their race, but in the sense of carrying unconscious biases that result in racist behavior and outcomes. The impact is the same regardless of intent, and I'm responsible for that impact." "Are you worried about lawsuits from former employees?" "I expect there will be lawsuits, and I expect many of them will be justified. We've failed people, and they deserve accountability and restitution." "What do you say to investors who think you're making a mistake by stepping down?" "I say that my ego is not more important than 3,000 jobs. I say that the company I built needs leadership I can't provide. And I say that if investors only care about returns and not about the human cost of how those returns are generated, then they're part of the problem." A younger reporter from TechCrunch stood. "There are people on social media saying you don't deserve redemption, that you should lose everything. How does that make you feel?" Vivian looked directly into the camera. "I think redemption is something you earn through sustained action over years, not something you get for making a good apology. And I think people have every right to be angry with me. Their anger is valid. My job now isn't to manage their perception of me. It's to do the actual work of change, whether anyone ever forgives me or not." The questions continued for another 20 minutes. Vivian answered each one honestly, even when honesty made her look worse. She didn't deflect, didn't minimize, didn't hide behind corporate speak. When someone asked if she thought she deserved to keep any role at Axiom, she said she wasn't sure, but she was willing to do whatever work the new CEO and board determined was valuable. When someone asked if she regretted building the company, she said she regretted how she'd built it and whom she'd excluded in the process. Finally, Maya gave the signal that they were out of time. Vivian thanked the journalists and walked off the platform on legs that felt like water. The moment she was out of camera range, she bent over and thought she might be sick. Richard appeared with a bottle of water. "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest. I honestly can't tell which." "Neither can I," Vivian admitted. Her phone exploded with notifications. Twitter mentions, news alerts, LinkedIn messages, texts from people she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored all of it except one message from Simone Clark. "Malik says that's a start. Legal team will be in touch tomorrow to finalize the funding agreement. The real work begins now." Vivian looked at Maya. "How bad is the reaction?" Maya scrolled through her tablet, her face a mask of professional neutrality that was starting to crack. "Mixed. Some people are calling you courageous. Some are calling it performative. A lot of people are angry that it took this long. There's a hashtag trending, hashtag too little too late. But there's also hashtag accountability matters. And," she paused. Jennifer Washington tweeted about the press conference. She said it was the first time she's seen a tech CEO actually admit to causing harm instead of just apologizing for how people felt. Vivian closed her eyes. 1 point of credibility from someone she'd failed. It wasn't redemption, but maybe it was the first step on a very long road. Ethan Park found her in the hallway, 20 minutes later. The board wants to meet tomorrow to discuss CEO succession. They're asking for my input. You should give it. You understand this company better than almost anyone. I also understand that I'm one of the people you repeatedly passed over for promotion, which means if I become CEO, it's going to look like I benefited from your downfall. Vivian met his eyes. Or it could look like the board finally recognized what they should have seen years ago, that you're the right person for the job. Ethan, you've earned this. Don't let my mistakes make you doubt that. He studied her face, looking for manipulation or hidden agendas, finding only exhaustion and something that looked like genuine remorse. If I do this, things are going to change, radically. The old guard, the people you felt comfortable with, some of them are going to have to go. Good. Including some of your friends. I don't have friends at this company. I have people I used to think were allies because they never challenged me. That's not the same thing. Ethan nodded slowly. Okay then, I'll talk to the board. But Vivian, this can't just be about swapping out the CEO and calling it transformation. We need systemic change, new policies, new accountability structures, new ways of measuring success that include culture and equity alongside financial metrics. I know, and I'll support that work however I can. Even if it means dismantling everything you built, especially if it means that. He left, and Vivian returned to her office to find a package waiting on her desk. No return address, just her name printed on plain brown paper. She opened it carefully and found a book inside. How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. A note was tucked inside the front cover, written in precise handwriting she recognized from the funding documents. The note said, "Reading is not enough, but it's a place to start." M.R. Vivian sat at her desk and opened the book. Outside her window, San Francisco gleamed in the afternoon sun, indifferent to the small personal apocalypse happening 43 floors up. Her phone kept buzzing with messages she wasn't ready to answer. The live stream of her press conference had been viewed over 2 million times in the past 3 hours. Her Wikipedia page was already updated to include the Four Seasons incident and her resignation. And somewhere in New York, Malik Rivers was probably moving on to his next investment opportunity, satisfied that he'd extracted appropriate consequences from someone who'd revealed her character in 90 seconds of caught-on-camera ugliness. But Vivian wasn't moving on. She was sitting in the wreckage of her own making, finally understanding that the empire she'd built had been constructed on a foundation of exclusion and bias. And now she had to figure out how to help build something better, even if she'd never get credit for it. Even if the only legacy she left was the cautionary tale of what happened when power met privilege, and never bothered to examine itself until forced. The sun dropped lower on the horizon, painting the city in shades of gold and shadow. In 12 hours, the board would meet. In 72 hours, the funding agreement would be signed. In 6 months, the cultural audit results would be published. And Vivian Sterling would have to wake up every single day and choose to do the hard work of change, knowing that forgiveness was not guaranteed and redemption was not a destination, but a direction. She turned to the first page of Malik's book and began to read. The board meeting convened at 9 the next morning in the same conference room where Vivian had faced judgment 48 hours earlier. She sat at the far end of the table, no longer in the power position at the head, but in a chair against the wall like a witness waiting to testify. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Margaret Chen called the meeting to order with the efficiency of someone who'd presided over dozens of corporate restructurings. We're here to discuss CEO succession. The funding agreement with Cornerstone Capital requires Vivian to step down from operational leadership within 30 days. We need to identify candidates and move quickly. James Worthington pulled up a spreadsheet on the screen. I've compiled a list of external candidates with strong track records in corporate turnarounds. CEOs who've successfully navigated crisis situations and rebuilt company cultures. With all due respect, Ethan Park said from his seat near the middle of the table, bringing in someone from outside sends exactly the wrong message right now. It tells our employees that we don't value internal talent. It tells the world that we're more interested in optics than genuine transformation. James frowned. We need experienced leadership. This isn't the time for on-the-job training. I agree we need experienced leadership, but experience comes in different forms.
I've been at this company for 7 years. I've led product development through 3 major launches. I know our technology, our people, our challenges. What I haven't done is perpetuate the toxic culture that got us here, because I was never part of the inner circle that created it. Margaret set down her pen. Ethan, are you putting yourself forward as a candidate? The room went quiet. Vivian watched Ethan's face, saw him weighing the risk against the necessity. This was the moment that would define his career. Step up and potentially fail publicly, or step back and watch someone else try to fix what he knew was broken. I am, Ethan said finally, not because I think I have all the answers, but because I understand what needs to change, and I'm willing to do the uncomfortable work of actually changing it. You've never been a CEO, James pointed out. Neither had Vivian when she started this company. The difference is I'm not interested in building an empire. I'm interested in building an organization that values people as much as it values innovation. Margaret looked around the table. Other thoughts? Richard Moss spoke up. From a financial perspective, continuity of leadership matters to investors and partners. Ethan knows our business model, our revenue streams, our cost structure. He can hit the ground running without the 6-month learning curve an external candidate would need. And given that we're already asking people to trust us through massive cultural change, minimizing operational disruption seems prudent. One of the board members Vivian barely knew, a woman named Patricia who'd joined 2 years ago and rarely spoke, raised her hand. I'd like to hear from Vivian. You've worked closely with Ethan for years. Do you think he can do this job? All eyes turned to Vivian. She could feel the weight of the question, the trap embedded in it. If she endorsed Ethan too strongly, it would look like she was trying to maintain influence through a proxy. If she hesitated, she'd be undermining someone who deserved the opportunity. Yes, Vivian said simply. Ethan should have been promoted to VP of Product 3 years ago. I passed him over because I was more comfortable with executives who didn't challenge me. That was my failure, not his. He's brilliant, strategic, and he actually listens to people, which is apparently a skill I never developed. If you're serious about transformation, he's the right choice. Ethan looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. Maybe he'd expected her to hedge, to protect her ego. Maybe he was just unused to Vivian giving someone else credit without taking some for herself. Margaret made a note. We'll need to interview Ethan formally and review other candidates for due diligence. But I'm inclined to agree that internal promotion sends the right signal. Ethan, can you prepare a 90-day plan outlining your priorities and approach to cultural transformation? I already have one, Ethan said, pulling a document from his bag. I started working on it after Vivian's press conference. Of course he did, Vivian thought. While she'd been drowning in public judgment and private shame, Ethan had been preparing to actually lead. That was the difference between them. He thought about solutions while she'd spent years thinking about herself. The meeting continued for another hour, covering operational details and transition timelines. When it finally adjourned, Vivian slipped out before anyone could corner her for uncomfortable conversations. She took the stairs instead of the elevator, needing the physical exertion to quiet her racing mind. On the landing between floors, her phone rang. Unknown number, New York area code. She answered. Ms. Sterling, this is Lawrence Chen from Cornerstone Capital's legal team. I'm calling to confirm you received the final funding documents. I did. My CFO is reviewing them. Excellent. We'll need signatures by Friday to meet the timeline in the agreement. I'm also calling to inform you that Mr. Rivers has requested a face-to-face meeting next week to discuss the cultural audit framework and accountability measures. Vivian's stomach dropped. He wants to meet with me? Yes. He prefers to establish clear expectations and oversight protocols before the funding is finalized. Can you be in New York on Tuesday? Of course. Perfect. My assistant will send you the details. And Ms. Sterling? Mr. Rivers asked me to remind you that this is a business meeting, not a therapy session. Come prepared with concrete plans, not intentions. The line went dead. Vivian sat on the stairs staring at her phone. Malik was making her work for every dollar, every ounce of redemption. He wasn't going to let her coast on good intentions or impressive apologies. He wanted receipts, metrics, proof that change was happening beyond the press conference sound bites. She pulled up her email and found a message from Maya with the subject line. You need to see this. The body contained a link to a Medium post titled, "I worked at Axiom Technologies, and this is what Vivian Sterling won't tell you." The author was anonymous, but the details were specific enough to be credible. The post described a culture of favoritism and exclusion, of ideas stolen from junior employees and credited to senior leaders, of women and people of color being talked over in meetings and then blamed for not speaking up. It described an HR department that protected executives instead of employees, a promotion system based on golf course access and after-work drinks at bars where not everyone felt welcome. The post had been published 4 hours ago. It already had 50,000 views and 3,000 comments. Vivian read it twice, her chest tightening with each paragraph. Everything described was true, or at least plausible enough that she couldn't dismiss it. This was what her company looked like from the bottom up instead of the top down. This was the reality she'd been too comfortable to see. She forwarded the link to Ethan with a message. "This is what you're inheriting, and this is why the work matters." His response came within minutes. "I know. Half my team sent it to me this morning. We're going to fix it, but it's going to be brutal." Vivian pocketed her phone and continued down the stairs. When she reached the lobby, she found William at his security desk reading a newspaper. He looked up as she approached. "Ms. Sterling? Heading out? Just needed some air. William, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "How long have you worked in security?" 23 years, 15 at Axiom, 8 before that at other tech companies. "And in all that time, how many times have you seen someone like me, a CEO, a founder, actually face consequences for the way they treat people?" William set down his newspaper and really looked at her. "You want the honest answer?" "Always." "Never. I've seen plenty of executives get caught doing terrible things. Sexual harassment, discrimination, fraud. You know what usually happens? They get a golden parachute and a new job 6 months later. The company issues a statement, maybe does some training, and then everything goes back to normal." He paused. "So when I heard you were stepping down, actually stepping down instead of just taking a leave of absence or moving to a board seat, I thought maybe something was different this time." "Do you believe that? That something's different?" William considered the question. "I believe you're embarrassed. I believe you got caught and you're trying to manage the damage. What I don't know yet is if you're actually going to do the work when nobody's watching anymore. When the cameras are gone and the journalists move on to the next scandal. That's when we'll see if this is real or just performance." Vivian nodded. "That's fair. Thank you for being honest. Ms. Sterling, one more thing. That meeting you had yesterday with the employees of color, people are talking about it. Some are hopeful. Some are skeptical. But everyone noticed that you listened. That's not nothing. Don't waste it." She left the building and walked aimlessly through Soma, past coffee shops filled with young engineers building the next disruptive startup, past homeless encampments that illustrated the city's grotesque inequality, past glass towers housing companies that claimed to be changing the world while often just extracting wealth from it. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Saw the news. Call me." Vivian hadn't spoken to her mother in 3 months. Catherine Sterling was a society fixture in Connecticut, a woman who'd built her identity on her husband's success and her daughter's achievements. The press conference would have humiliated her in front of the country club set. Vivian called. Her mother answered on the first ring. "Vivian Marie Sterling, what in heaven's name were you thinking?" No hello, no how are you. Straight to the judgment. Classic Catherine. "I was thinking I needed to take accountability for my actions. By humiliating yourself on national television, by admitting to things that will follow you for the rest of your life, you've destroyed your reputation over one mistake at a cocktail party." "It wasn't one mistake, Mom. It was a pattern of behavior that's been enabled and rewarded for years. The Four Seasons was just the moment it became visible." "Oh, don't give me that liberal guilt nonsense. You built a successful company. You created jobs. You were on track to be one of the most influential women in technology. And you threw it all away because some activist investor decided to make an example of you." Vivian stopped walking. She was standing in front of a mural depicting tech workers as superheroes, saving the world one algorithm at a time. The irony was almost painful. Malik Rivers didn't make an example of me. He gave me a chance to do the right thing, and if you can't understand why that matters,
Then maybe we don't have anything else to talk about right now.
Don't you dare hang up on me. I'm not hanging up. I'm telling you that I can't have this conversation with you until you're willing to acknowledge that what I did was wrong. Not just strategically unwise or politically incorrect, but actually morally wrong. Her mother was quiet for a long moment. Your father would be ashamed. Probably. He taught me to build networks of people who looked like us and thought like us. He taught me that success meant surrounding yourself with the right kind of people. And I followed that advice perfectly, and it led me here. So yeah, he'd probably be ashamed, but I'm starting to think maybe his approval isn't worth having. She ended the call before her mother could respond. Her hands were shaking, from anger or grief or relief, she couldn't tell. She'd spent 38 years trying to win her parents' approval, trying to prove she was worthy of the resources and opportunities they'd given her. And in 30 seconds, she'd just acknowledged that their value system was fundamentally broken. It should have felt devastating. Instead, it felt like breathing. Vivian's phone rang again. This time it was Sofia Ramirez, the legal team member who'd spoken up during the employee meeting. Vivian almost didn't answer. What could Sofia possibly want from her? But she'd promised to listen, so she picked up. Ms. Sterling, I hope I'm not bothering you. Not at all. What can I do for you? I wanted to let you know that the engineer I reported last year, the one who made racist comments about my accent, just resigned. He sent a company-wide email saying he couldn't work at a place that prioritized political correctness over merit. Vivian felt a grim satisfaction. Good riddance. That's what I thought too. But then I started getting messages from other engineers saying Sofia Ramirez ran him out of the company, that I'm part of the woke mob ruining tech culture. I've gotten 17 emails in the past hour, some of them pretty vicious. Sofia's voice wavered. I'm not calling to complain. I'm calling because I want you to understand that when you commit to cultural change, there will be pushback. Some people are going to fight it, and the people who speak up, who report problems, who push for accountability, we're going to be targets. I understand, and I'm sorry you're dealing with that. I don't need an apology. I need you to make sure the new CEO understands that transformation isn't just about new policies. It's about protecting the people who are brave enough to demand better, even when it makes others uncomfortable. I'll make sure Ethan knows. Sophia, can I ask you something? Why are you still there? You could have left months ago, probably gotten a better job somewhere else. Why stay? Sophia was quiet for a moment. Because I'm tired of running. I've left 3 tech companies because of toxic cultures, and every time I thought the next place would be different, and every time it wasn't. So I decided that if things are going to change in this industry, it can't just be about moving to the least bad option. Someone has to stay and fight, even when it's exhausting, even when it hurts. Vivian felt the weight of that sacrifice. Sophia and people like her were bearing the cost of cultural transformation, while people like Vivian, the ones who'd created the problem, got credit for fixing it. Thank you for fighting, Vivian said. And thank you for calling. I'll talk to Ethan today about protection protocols for employees who file complaints or speak up about discrimination. After Sophia hung up, Vivian spent the next 3 hours in a coffee shop drafting an action plan for her Tuesday meeting with Malik. Not the kind of plan a consultant would write, full of buzzwords and inspirational rhetoric. A real plan with concrete steps, measurable outcomes, and accountability checkpoints. She outlined the cultural audit scope, including third-party review of every personnel decision made in the past 5 years. She detailed the compensation equity analysis that would identify and correct pay disparities. She mapped out the new HR infrastructure, including anonymous reporting systems, mandatory training with teeth instead of checkbox compliance, and quarterly culture surveys with published results and action plans. She also drafted a proposal for an employee council, a representative body of workers from all levels and departments who would have direct input on policy decisions and regular meetings with executive leadership. Not a toothless committee that met once a quarter to rubber stamp decisions already made, but a group with real power to shape company direction. By the time she looked up, it was past 7 p.m. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. Her back ached from hunching over her laptop, and she had 15 unread messages from reporters requesting interviews, from former colleagues expressing shock or support, or schadenfreude, from her lawyer warning her that the first lawsuits had been filed by former employees claiming discrimination.
Vivian closed her laptop and walked back to Axiom. The building was mostly dark, but lights still glowed on a few floors where engineers were working late. She badged in through the lobby. William had gone home, replaced by the night shift security guard who nodded without recognition, and took the elevator to the third floor. The design studio was empty except for one person. Keisha Matthews sat at her desk, headphones on, working on what looked like a UI mock-up for a new product feature. She was so focused she didn't notice Vivian standing in the doorway. Vivian knocked softly on the doorframe. Keisha looked up, pulled off her headphones, and her expression went carefully neutral. "Ms. Sterling, I don't want to interrupt. I just wanted to say that I saw your work on the diagnostic interface redesign. It's brilliant. The way you simplified the data visualization makes complex medical information actually accessible to patients instead of just doctors. It's the kind of design that could genuinely save lives." Keisha studied her, looking for the angle. "Thank you. I also wanted to say that I'm sorry. You've been here 2 years and I've never had a real conversation with you. I've never asked about your design philosophy or your career goals or what you need to do your best work. I hired you because a recruiter told me it would help our diversity numbers, and then I never invested in actually supporting your success." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you deserve to hear it. And because when Ethan becomes CEO, I want you to know that the old rules don't apply anymore. You don't have to work twice as hard for half the recognition. You don't have to prove you belong. You're already excellent. The company just needs to start treating you like it." Keisha leaned back in her chair. "You know what the hardest part is? It's not the big obvious discrimination. It's the 1,000 small things. The way my ideas get credited to other people. The way I'm expected to explain every design decision in excruciating detail while the white designers get trusted on instinct. The way I'm always described as passionate or emotional when I advocate for my work, but my male colleagues are visionary when they do the same thing. Those things are harder to fight because they're subtle. People can claim they didn't mean it that way, but the impact accumulates. I believe you, and I'm sorry I created an environment where that was allowed to happen. Apologies don't fix systems. What's going to actually change?" Vivian sat in the chair across from Keisha's desk. "Honest answer? I don't know yet. But Ethan is building a plan and I'm going to support it however I can. We're bringing in external auditors to examine everything. Hiring, promotions, compensation, performance reviews. We're establishing employee councils with real power. We're implementing bias training that actually means something instead of just checking a box. And we're creating consequences for people who perpetuate discrimination, even if they're high performers. And what about you? What happens to you in all this?" "I'm stepping down as CEO, transitioning to an advisory role with no operational authority, donating $5 million to racial equity organizations, and accepting oversight from Malik Rivers' team to ensure we follow through." Keisha's eyebrows rose. "You're actually doing it? I thought maybe the press conference was just theater, but you're really blowing up your own career." "I'm accepting consequences. That's not the same as heroism." "No, but it's more than most people in your position would do." Keisha picked up a stylus and spun it between her fingers. "I got that Google offer I mentioned. Better pay, fancy title, unlimited PTO. I was going to accept it this week." "You should. You don't owe this company anything. Except that if I leave, I'm abandoning the people who are staying to fight. I'm letting the toxic culture win, and I'm really tired of letting toxic cultures win." She set down the stylus. "So I'm going to stay. For now. But if things don't actually change, if this turns out to be just performance, I'm gone. And I'll make sure everyone knows why." "Fair enough?" Vivian stood to leave, but Keisha stopped her. "One more thing. That award I won last month, the one you sent the congratulations email about, I know Maya wrote it. I know you probably didn't even know I'd been nominated. But here's the thing. I didn't win that award because I'm a diversity hire who got lucky. I won it because I'm one of the best UX designers in the industry. And if Axiom is going to become the kind of place where people like me can thrive, the leadership needs to actually recognize excellence instead of just checking boxes." "You're right. I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing and start seeing. That's what we need from the people in power. Not guilt, not performance, just the willingness to actually see us as we are." Vivian left the design studio carrying those words like stones.
Stop apologizing and start seeing. It sounded simple, but it required a fundamental rewiring of how she processed the world, how she assessed value, how she distributed opportunity and recognition. She made it back to her apartment around 9 p.m. The penthouse felt too big, too empty, too much like a monument to success built on foundations of exclusion. Vivian poured herself a glass of wine she didn't drink and stood at the window overlooking the bay. Somewhere in this city, 3,000 Axiom employees were living their lives, feeding kids, paying bills, worrying about the future. Some were relieved by the changes coming. Some were angry about the chaos. Some were exhausted from years of fighting to be seen and weren't sure if they had the energy to hope again. And somewhere in New York, Malik Rivers was probably reviewing her plan for Tuesday's meeting, marking up the places where her thinking was still shallow or performative, preparing questions that would force her to confront her own blind spots. Vivian's phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Board voted. I'm officially CEO effective next Monday. First priority is employee town hall to outline transformation plan. Second priority is cultural audit scope. Third priority is surviving my first week without completely screwing this up. Any advice? She typed back. Listen more than you talk. Elevate voices you've been ignoring. Fire anyone who creates hostile environments, regardless of their performance metrics. And don't make the same mistakes I did by surrounding yourself with people who make you comfortable. Surround yourself with people who challenge you. That's good advice. Wish you'd followed it yourself. Me too. Vivian set down her phone and returned to the window. The city lights reflected off the water, doubling their glow. She thought about William's question. Would she do the work when nobody was watching? When the cameras left and the journalists found the next scandal and the Twitter mob moved on to easier targets? She didn't know, but she was going to find out, because the alternative, going back to the comfortable blindness that had defined her first 10 years as CEO, was no longer an option. She'd seen too much, heard too much, understood too much about the harm she'd caused and the lives she'd impacted. Tuesday's meeting with Malik would tell her whether she was ready for the real work, whether her plans were substantial or just sophisticated excuses, whether she'd actually learned anything or was just better at performing contrition. Vivian opened her laptop and reviewed the action plan one more time, red-penning the sections that felt too vague or aspirational. She worked until past midnight, refining and strengthening, turning intentions into commitments and commitments into measurable objectives. And when she finally closed the laptop and went to bed, she dreamed of standing in the Four Seasons lobby again. But this time, when Malik extended his hand, she took it. And this time, she asked his name. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only comes after sleepless nights spent rehearsing conversations that might never happen. Vivian landed at JFK at 7 a.m., took a car service directly to Cornerstone Capital, and arrived 90 minutes early for her 10 o'clock meeting with Malik. She sat in the same lobby where she'd waited 11 hours just days before, clutching a leather portfolio containing her action plan and enough documentation to prove she'd done more than think about change. She'd begun architecting it. The receptionist, the same young woman who'd witnessed Vivian's marathon wait, offered a small, knowing smile. Mr. Rivers is expecting you at 10. Can I get you coffee while you wait? Thank you. Black, no sugar. At 9:58, Simone Clark emerged from the elevator. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and her expression was professionally neutral in a way that somehow communicated both respect and warning. Ms. Sterling, right on time. Follow me. They took the elevator to the 42nd floor, but this time Simone led her past the small windowless conference room to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Malik stood at the glass, hands in his pockets, watching the city move below him. He turned as they entered. Vivian, thank you for coming. His tone was cordial but not warm, the voice of someone willing to do business but not interested in pretending they were friends. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Malik gestured to a conference table near the windows. Let's get started. I have another meeting at 11:30, so we've got 90 minutes. Simone will be joining us to take notes and provide oversight perspective. They settled around the table. Vivian pulled out her portfolio and slid copies of her action plan across to Malik and Simone. The document was 43 pages long, organized into 6 major categories, each with specific initiatives, timelines, success metrics, and accountability checkpoints. Malik flipped through it slowly,
his expression unreadable. Simone did the same, occasionally making notes in the margins. The silence stretched for 5 minutes while they read. Vivian forced herself not to fidget, not to fill the quiet with nervous explanations or defensive justifications. Finally, Malik set down the document. "This is more comprehensive than I expected. Walk me through the cultural audit scope." Vivian opened to page 7. "We're engaging Morgan and Associates, a firm that specializes in workplace equity audits. They'll have unrestricted access to all personnel files, compensation data, performance reviews, promotion decisions, and HR complaints from the past 5 years. They'll conduct confidential interviews with current and former employees. And they'll examine our policies against industry best practices for equity and inclusion." Timeline? 6 months for the full audit. Preliminary findings in 90 days. All results will be published on our website with no redactions except where legally required to protect individual privacy. What happens when the audit reveals problems? We implement the recommended changes within 30 days of receiving the report. We establish a remediation plan for any identified pay disparities and back pay where appropriate. We discipline or terminate employees who've engaged in discriminatory behavior, regardless of their performance or seniority. And we publish quarterly progress reports showing how we're addressing each finding. Malik leaned back. "You understand that publishing this information will likely trigger lawsuits from former employees who experienced discrimination." "I do. Our legal team estimates we'll face between 15 and 30 claims. We're setting aside reserves to settle valid complaints and defend against frivolous ones. But more importantly, we're accepting that legal consequences are part of accountability." Simone spoke for the first time. "What about current leadership? The executives who created or perpetuated this culture, what happens to them?" Vivian had been dreading this question because the answer was going to hurt people she'd worked with for years. Anyone identified by the audit as having engaged in discriminatory behavior or created hostile environments will be terminated, regardless of their role or tenure. Anyone who failed to act on reports of discrimination will face consequences ranging from demotion to termination depending on severity. And we're establishing a zero-tolerance policy going forward. One substantiated complaint results in immediate removal. "That's going to decimate your leadership team," Simone said. "Probably. But keeping them would perpetuate the exact problems we're trying to fix. Ethan Park, our new CEO, is already identifying potential replacements from within the company and recruiting externally for roles we can't fill internally." Malik turned to page 15. "Tell me about the employee council." "We're establishing a representative body of 12 employees from different levels, departments, and backgrounds. They'll meet monthly with executive leadership to provide input on policy decisions, raise concerns, and serve as a bridge between frontline workers and management. They'll have the authority to escalate issues directly to the board if leadership isn't responsive. And council members will be protected from retaliation. Any adverse action against a council member triggers an automatic investigation." "Who selects the council members?" "Employees vote. We're holding elections next month with nominations from peers. The only requirement is that council composition must reflect the company's demographic diversity. We won't allow a council that's all white or all male or all senior engineers." Malik nodded slowly. "What about compensation equity?" Vivian turned to page 22. "We're conducting a comprehensive compensation analysis comparing pay across roles, controlling for experience, performance, and seniority. Any disparities that can't be explained by legitimate business factors will be corrected immediately with back pay where appropriate. We're also establishing transparent salary bands for every role and publishing them internally so employees know what they should be earning." "That's going to be expensive." "We've budgeted $12 million for compensation corrections and back pay. It's expensive, but it's necessary. You can't claim to value equity while paying people differently for the same work." Simone made another note. "What about the $5 million personal donation you committed to?" "Already in process. $2 million to Code 2040, which supports Black and Latinx engineers. $2 million to Project Include, which helps tech companies build inclusive cultures. $1 million to a scholarship fund for underrepresented students pursuing computer science degrees. The donations will be announced publicly with an explanation of why I'm making them." Malik stood and walked to the window. He was quiet for a long moment, watching the city below. When he spoke, his voice was softer, but no less serious. Everything you've outlined is good, comprehensive, more substantial than most companies would commit to. But here's what I need you to understand, Vivian. This isn't a project with an end date. This isn't something you do for 6 months or a year and then declare victory. Building an equitable culture is ongoing work that requires constant attention, constant course correction, constant willingness to be uncomfortable. The moment you think you've solved it is the moment you start sliding backward. I understand. Do you? Because I've seen a lot of companies make big promises after getting caught. They bring in consultants, run training programs, update their websites with diversity statements, and 2 years later, nothing has actually changed except the PR language. The same people are in power. The same patterns persist. The only difference is they've gotten better at hiding it. Vivian stood and joined him at the window. Below them, Manhattan teemed with millions of people pursuing their own versions of success, most of them never questioning whether the systems they operated in were fair or just. I can't promise I won't mess this up, Vivian said quietly. I can't promise that my blind spots won't resurface or that I won't make new mistakes I can't even anticipate right now. But I can promise that I'm done hiding. I'm done being comfortable. And I'm done prioritizing my ego over other people's dignity. If that's not enough, then I understand. But it's all I have to offer. Malik turned to look at her. The press conference was good. The action plan is solid. But I want to know what happened in the time between that hotel lobby and now that actually changed you. Because people don't transform overnight. So what was the moment? What was the thing that made you actually see instead of just performing seeing? Vivian thought about Jennifer Washington's phone call, about Amber Johnson's exhausted hope, about Sophia Ramirez fighting battles she shouldn't have to fight. She thought about Ethan Park's quiet competence that she'd overlooked for years, about Keisha Matthews designing brilliant work that Vivian had never properly acknowledged. She thought about William asking if she'd do the work when nobody was watching. It wasn't one moment, she said finally. It was 100 small ones. Every story I heard from employees about being dismissed or overlooked, every time I had to admit I'd made assumptions based on appearance instead of merit. Every time someone asked me a question I should have been able to answer but couldn't because I'd never bothered to learn. The accumulation of all those moments made it impossible to keep lying to myself about who I'd been and what I'd built. Malik studied her face for a long moment. Okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm approving the funding, $500 million for Series C, structured as we discussed in the term sheet. But the oversight provisions are non-negotiable. Simone will join your board as Cornerstone's representative. She'll have full access to audit results, compensation data, and employee feedback. And if she reports that you're backsliding or performing instead of transforming, I pull the funding and you're on your own. I understand. I'm also requiring quarterly meetings between you, me, and Ethan for the next 2 years. Not board meetings with formal agendas, actual conversations about what's working, what's not, and what needs to change. You don't get to hide behind corporate structures or delegate this to your HR team. This is personal accountability, and it stays personal. Agreed. Simone spoke up. One more thing. We want you to participate in a documentary. Vivian's head snapped toward her. What? There's a filmmaker named Marcus Webb who makes documentaries about corporate culture and systemic change. He's interested in following Axiom's transformation over the next year. Full access, board meetings, employee town halls, audit results, everything. The goal is to create an honest record of what it actually takes to change a toxic culture, including all the failures and setbacks along the way. You want to document my failures? We want to document the process, Malik said, because other companies need to see that transformation is messy and hard and doesn't happen through mission statements and diversity training. They need to see the real work, and you need the accountability of knowing your efforts are being recorded and will eventually be public. Vivian felt her chest tighten. A documentary meant cameras following her through the most humiliating period of her professional life. It meant every mistake would be preserved forever, every moment of backsliding or defensiveness captured on film. It also meant she couldn't quit when things got hard, couldn't retreat into comfortable patterns, couldn't pretend she was doing better than she was. Okay, she heard herself say. I'll do it. Malik extended his hand across the table. Then we have a deal. This time, Vivian took his hand without hesitation. His grip was firm, professional, and carried the weight of someone who'd fought too many battles to trust easily, but was willing to give chances to people who earned them. "Don't make me regret this," Malik said. "I'll do my best not to." The meeting ended at 11:15. Simone walked Vivian back to the elevator, and as the doors were closing, she said something that would stay with Vivian for months to come. "The hard part isn't admitting you were wrong. The hard part is staying committed to being different when the spotlight moves on and nobody's watching anymore. That's when we'll see who you really are." The elevator descended and Vivian watched the floor numbers drop, feeling like she was falling toward a future that was completely uncertain but somehow more honest than the past she was leaving behind. She flew back to San Francisco that evening. When she arrived at Axiom the next morning, the building felt different, quieter somehow, as if it was holding its breath. Vivian made her way to what used to be her office and found Ethan sitting at the desk, reviewing spreadsheets on dual monitors. He looked up. "How'd it go?" "He approved the funding. Simone Clark is joining the board as Cornerstone's representative. And we're going to be part of a documentary about corporate transformation." Ethan whistled low. "You really committed to full transparency, didn't you?" "Apparently I did." Vivian sat in one of the chairs across from him, another symbolic shift from power to partnership. "How's the transition going?" "Terrifying. I've been CEO for 48 hours, and I've already had 12 senior engineers threaten to quit if we implement mandatory bias training, 3 board members question whether I'm experienced enough for this role, and 1 very angry email from a VP who found out he's being demoted pending the audit results." "Welcome to leadership." Ethan leaned back. "You know what's strange? I spent 7 years watching you run this company and thinking I could do better. And now that I'm actually in the seat, I realize how easy it is to make the same mistakes you did, to prioritize comfort over change, to surround myself with people who agree with me instead of challenging me, to get defensive when people point out problems. So what are you going to do differently?" "I'm going to fail faster. When I make mistakes, and I will make mistakes, I'm going to acknowledge them immediately instead of letting them fester. I'm going to build a leadership team that includes people who make me uncomfortable because they see things I miss. And I'm going to remember that being CEO doesn't make me right. It just gives me more ways to be wrong at scale." Vivian smiled despite herself. "That's better wisdom than I ever had." Over the next 6 months, Axiom Technologies underwent a transformation that was documented in painful detail by Marcus Webb's documentary crew. The cameras captured everything. The employee town hall where Ethan outlined his vision, and half the room walked out unconvinced. The board meeting where 3 directors resigned rather than support the changes, the day the audit results came back and revealed exactly how systemic the discrimination had been. The audit found that women and people of color at Axiom were paid an average of 18% less than white men in equivalent roles. It found that promotion rates for underrepresented groups were 40% lower even when controlling for performance ratings. It found that 83% of discrimination complaints over the past 5 years had been dismissed without meaningful investigation. It found that several senior leaders had created hostile work environments, but faced no consequences because they were considered too valuable to lose. Morgan & Associates published their findings in a 147-page report that went live on Axiom's website at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. By noon, every major tech publication had covered it. By evening, 3 class action lawsuits had been filed by former employees. By the end of the week, 7 executives had been terminated and 2 more had resigned. The documentary cameras captured Vivian's face as she read the report for the first time, saw the moment when the full scope of what she'd enabled finally hit her. They captured her meeting with the legal team to discuss settlement strategy. They captured her sitting alone in a conference room at midnight, crying for the first time in years because the weight of what she'd done to people's careers and lives was finally real to her. But they also captured the moments of progress. The Employee Council's first meeting, where 12 people from across the company gathered to discuss how to rebuild trust. The Compensation Equity Initiative that distributed $14 million in back pay and salary corrections to 370 employees who'd been systematically underpaid. The new anonymous reporting system that generated 43 complaints in its first month, a number that horrified leadership but ultimately proved that people finally felt safe speaking up. The cameras captured Sofia Ramirez being promoted to senior legal counsel, a position she'd been qualified for 2 years earlier. They captured Keisha Matthews winning a second industry award and Ethan actually showing up to congratulate her in person. They captured Amber Johnson deciding not to take the Google offer because for the first time in her career, she felt like she might actually have a future at Axiom. And they captured the failures too. The bias training session that devolved into defensive arguments when white male engineers insisted they were being unfairly blamed for systemic problems. The retention crisis when 28 employees left in 1 month because they didn't believe the changes were genuine. The moment when Vivian lost her temper during a board meeting and had to apologize for reverting to her old authoritarian style under pressure. The documentary showed that transformation wasn't a straight line from broken to fixed. It was 2 steps forward, 1 step back, constant vigilance, constant work, constant willingness to be uncomfortable. 9 months after the Four Seasons incident, Axiom held its annual all-hands meeting. The auditorium was packed with employees and the energy was different than previous years. Less performative enthusiasm, more cautious optimism. Ethan took the stage without the usual flashy presentation. Just him, a microphone, and the truth. "I'm not going to stand up here and tell you we've solved all our problems," he began. "Because we haven't. We're still working through compensation equity issues. We're still identifying and removing people who can't or won't change. We're still building trust with employees who have every reason not to trust us. But I can tell you that we're doing the work, really doing it, not just talking about it in press releases." He pulled up a slide showing concrete metrics. Representation of people of color in leadership positions had increased from 11% to 28%. The pay gap between underrepresented groups and their white male counterparts had dropped from 18% to 7%, with a plan to eliminate it entirely within 6 months. Employee retention for people of color had improved by 43%. And the most recent culture survey showed that 61% of employees believed leadership was genuinely committed to change, up from 18% 6 months earlier. "We have a long way to go," Ethan said, "but we're moving in the right direction. And I want to acknowledge the people who made that possible, the employees who stayed and fought for this company to be better, the people who filed complaints even when they knew it might cost them their careers, the people who called us out when we were performing instead of transforming. You're the reason Axiom still exists, not the technology, not the funding, you." The applause started slowly, then built. It wasn't the manufactured enthusiasm of previous all-hands meetings. It was something more real. Acknowledgement that the work mattered, that the struggle had value, that change was actually happening. After the meeting, Vivian found herself standing in the hallway outside the auditorium, watching employees file out. A few nodded at her, most ignored her. A handful gave her looks that ranged from suspicious to hostile. She'd earned all of it. Jennifer Washington appeared from the crowd. Vivian hadn't seen her since she'd resigned 8 months earlier. But there she was, wearing a visitor badge and carrying a laptop bag with a startup logo Vivian didn't recognize. "Jennifer." "Vivian." Jennifer stopped but didn't smile. "I came to see Ethan. He offered me a position as VP of Engineering." "Are you considering it?" "Maybe. I told him I'd sit in on the all-hands meeting first, see if the changes were real or just performance." She paused. "It's still too early to tell for sure, but what I saw today was different than what I experienced when I worked here. So yeah, I'm considering it." "I'm glad. You deserve to be here. You always did." "I know." Jennifer's voice was firm but not unkind. "The question was never whether I deserved to be here. The question was whether you were capable of creating an environment where people like me could thrive, and the jury's still out on that." "Fair enough." Jennifer started to walk away, then turned back. "One more thing, that documentary Marcus is making, I watched some of the rough cuts. It's brutal. You look terrible in parts of it, but you also look honest. And honestly, that matters, because a lot of people in your position would have tried to control the narrative, make themselves look better than they were. The fact that you're letting him show your failures might be the most convincing evidence that this is real." She left before Vivian could respond. The documentary premiered 11 months after the Four Seasons incident. It was titled The Handshake and ran 97 minutes. It premiered at South by Southwest and immediately generated intense discussion. Some viewers thought it was a redemption story. Others saw it as a cautionary tale. Most recognized it as something more complicated, a document of how hard it is to actually change systems of power and privilege, and how much sustained effort transformation requires. Vivian watched the premiere from the back of the theater, seeing herself on screen in ways she'd never had to confront before. She watched herself break down while reading the audit results. She watched herself stumble through difficult conversations with employees she'd harmed. She watched herself get defensive and then catch herself and apologize. She watched herself do the work of becoming someone different than who she'd been, understanding that the work would never be finished. After the screening, there was a Q&A with Vivian, Ethan, and Marcus Webb. A young black woman in the audience raised her hand. My question is for Vivian. Do you think you deserve forgiveness for what you did? The theater went quiet. Vivian thought about all the easy answers she could give, all the ways she could deflect or perform humility. Instead, she told the truth. No, I don't think I deserve forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't something you earn through effort or good intentions. It's something other people give you when and if they choose to. My job isn't to seek forgiveness. My job is to do the work of change regardless of whether anyone ever forgives me, because the goal isn't my redemption. The goal is building organizations and systems that don't harm people the way I did. The young woman nodded, satisfied with an answer that didn't center Vivian's feelings or needs. 1 year after the Four Seasons incident, Vivian returned to that same hotel for a reception. This time she wasn't there to schmooze investors. She was there as a guest speaker for a nonprofit focused on diversifying tech leadership. And this time, when she walked through those gleaming marble lobby doors, she saw the space differently. Not as a shrine to power and wealth, but as a place where people from all backgrounds deserved to feel they belonged. She was early, so she sat in one of the leather chairs near the entrance and pulled out her phone. There was a message from Malik. Simone says the latest quarterly report looks good. Keep going. Just 5 words. No praise, no congratulations. Just acknowledgement that the work was continuing, and that continuing was the point. Vivian was about to respond when someone sat down in the chair next to her. She looked up and found herself face to face with Malik Rivers. He was wearing the same navy polo and jeans he'd worn a year ago, and the symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. Malik, I didn't know you'd be here. I'm on the nonprofits board, came to hear you speak. He studied her face. You look tired. I am tired. Turns out dismantling systemic bias and rebuilding corporate culture while dealing with lawsuits and skeptical employees is exhausting. Good. If it was easy, everyone would do it. He leaned back, his expression softening slightly. I watched the documentary. Marcus did good work. You let him show the real stuff. Didn't have a choice. That was the deal. You had a choice. You could have pulled out at any time, paid the penalties, protected your image. The fact that you didn't matters. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? Why did you come to that reception a year ago? You knew what would probably happen. You could have just passed on Axiom and moved on to the next opportunity. Malik smiled. Because I've been testing people like you my entire career. People who've built success on systems of exclusion, but don't see it because they've never had to. Most of them fail the test exactly the way you did. But every once in a while, someone surprises me. Someone actually does the work instead of just performing contrition. And those people, the ones who transform instead of just pivoting, those are the ones who can actually change the industry. You think I've transformed? I think you're transforming. Present tense, continuous action. That's the point. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching people arrive for the reception. Then Malik stood and extended his hand, the same hand Vivian had recoiled from exactly 1 year ago. Ready to go in? This time Vivian took his hand without hesitation. His grip was warm, firm, and carried the weight of someone who decided to invest in her growth even when she didn't deserve it. They walked into the reception together, and Vivian understood that this moment, this simple handshake, finally accepted, was what redemption looked like when it was real. Not a destination reached, but a direction chosen. Not a single dramatic gesture, but 1,000 small ones, repeated over time until they became habit instead of performance. The reception was filled with young tech professionals from underrepresented backgrounds, all of them working to build careers in an industry that hadn't always wanted them. Vivian spoke for 20 minutes about her failures and what she'd learned from them. She didn't sugarcoat it, didn't frame herself as a hero of her own transformation story. She told them about the employees she'd harmed, the systems she'd perpetuated, the years she'd spent blind to her own biases, and she told them that the work of change was never finished, but it was always worth doing. After her talk, a young Latina woman approached her. "I'm Maria Gonzalez. I actually applied to Axiom 2 years ago and got rejected. I just reapplied last month. Should I accept if they offer me a position?" Vivian thought about how to answer honestly. "I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that Axiom today is different than it was 2 years ago. Not perfect, not even close, but different in ways that matter. The leadership is diverse, the systems have changed, and most importantly, there are people there now who will fight for you if something goes wrong. People like Ethan Park and Sophia Ramirez and Keisha Matthews who understand what it means to build a culture where everyone can thrive." Maria nodded. "And what about you? Are you still there?" "In an advisory role? No operational authority. I show up when Ethan needs perspective or when there's board business that requires my input, but I'm not leading anymore. I did that job, and I did it badly. Now I'm trying to support the people who can do it better. That must be hard. Giving up power. It is, but keeping it would have been worse, for me and for everyone else." Maria smiled slightly. "Okay, I'll think about it." As the reception wound down, Vivian found herself standing alone on the balcony overlooking the San Francisco Bay. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and amber. It was the same view she'd had from her penthouse, from her office at Axiom, from a dozen investor dinners and corporate events, but somehow it looked different now. Simone Clark joined her at the railing. "Ethan tells me you're stepping back from the board in 6 months. He told you that?" "He wanted my input on succession planning, making sure Cornerstone is comfortable with the transition." "And are you?" Simone was quiet for a moment, her gaze on the water. 2 years ago, if someone had told me that Vivian Sterling would voluntarily give up power and actually do the work of transformation, I would have laughed. But you did it. You're still doing it, and that matters more than you probably realize. "I'm not looking for credit." "I know. That's why you're getting it." Simone turned to face her. "Malik and I have been doing this work for 20 years, investing in companies, trying to push for equity and inclusion, watching most of them fail because the people in power won't actually change. You're one of the few who did, not because you wanted to, but because you were forced to confront yourself. And then you chose to keep confronting yourself even when the cameras left. What happens now? Now you live with it. You keep doing the work. You keep showing up when it's uncomfortable. You keep using whatever platform and privilege you have left to push for change in other companies, other industries. You don't get a happy ending where everyone forgives you and celebrates your redemption. You get something better, a life aligned with your values instead of your ego." Vivian watched the sun sink lower, the light fading from gold to rose to purple. "That's enough," she said quietly. "It has to be." They stood together in silence as the city transitioned from day to night, from the harsh clarity of sunlight to the softer glow of artificial lights. And in that liminal space between what had been and what might be, Vivian Sterling understood that transformation was never about becoming someone new. It was about finally becoming honest about who you'd always been and choosing to be different going forward. One small decision at a time, one uncomfortable conversation at a time, one extended hand, finally accepted, at a time. The documentary won an Emmy 8 months later. Axiom Technologies successfully closed its Series C funding round and used the capital to expand its healthcare diagnostics platform to underserved communities, partnering with clinics and hospitals that served predominantly Black and brown patients. Under Ethan's leadership, the company became known not just for its technology, but for its culture, a place where people from all backgrounds could build careers without having to fight for basic dignity and respect. 3 years after the Four Seasons incident, Vivian was invited to speak at a tech conference about corporate accountability and systemic change. She almost declined. Public speaking about her failures never got easier, but Malik called her personally and told her the work required visibility, not comfort. So she stood on stage in front of 1,500 tech leaders and told her story again, the whole ugly truth of it. And when she finished, A CEO from a major social media company approached her backstage. I watched your documentary, and I saw some of the same patterns in my own company, the same blind spots. I want to bring in auditors, do the real work. Can we talk? Vivian gave him Malik's number. Talk to him. He'll tell you what it actually requires. And if you're not ready to give up control and accept uncomfortable truths, don't waste his time. The CEO nodded and walked away. Vivian didn't know if he'd follow through. Most didn't, but some did. And that small percentage, the leaders willing to examine their own systems and make real changes, they were slowly shifting the industry. Not fast enough. Never fast enough. But the direction had changed, and direction mattered. 4 years after the handshake that never happened, Vivian returned to the Four Seasons for one final time. Axiom was hosting a celebration. The company had just been acquired by a healthcare conglomerate for $8 billion, and every employee from the past 5 years was invited to share in the success. The sale terms included provisions protecting Axiom's culture and ensuring continued investment in equitable practices. Ethan had negotiated those terms personally, refusing to sell unless the acquiring company committed to maintaining the standards Axiom had fought so hard to build. Vivian arrived early, as she always did, and found herself standing in the same spot where Malik had extended his hand 4 years earlier. The marble floors gleamed the same way they had then. The chandelier caught the light the same way. But everything else had changed. Malik walked through the entrance wearing a suit this time, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, the armor of someone who'd earned the right to set the terms of engagement. He saw Vivian and crossed the lobby, and when he reached her, he extended his hand one more time. But this time, there was no test. No experiment. Just a handshake between two people who'd walked through fire together and emerged changed by the heat. Congratulations, Malik said. You did it. Ethan did it. The employees did it. I just tried not to get in the way. That's growth. He smiled. The Vivian I met 4 years ago would have taken all the credit. The Vivian you met 4 years ago was terrible. I'm trying to be less terrible. You're succeeding. They walked into the celebration together. The room was filled with Axiom employees past and present, the people who'd stayed through the transformation, the people who'd left and come back, the people who'd fought for change when it felt impossible. Sophia Ramirez was there with her family. Keisha Matthews was laughing with a group of designers. Jennifer Washington had accepted the VP of Engineering role and was deep in conversation with Ethan about the next phase of product development. And in the center of the room, someone had set up a photo exhibit documenting Axiom's journey. Pictures from the early days in the Oakland warehouse, through the growth years, through the crisis, through the transformation. The final photo in this series was from the documentary, Vivian and Malik shaking hands in the Four Seasons lobby, 4 years after the original encounter, both of them changed by everything that had happened in between. Vivian stood looking at that photo for a long time. A young employee she didn't recognize stopped beside her. Is that you? It is. I've heard the story. About what happened here, about how you messed up and then actually fixed it. Most of the senior engineers use it as a case study when we're training new hires on culture and inclusion. What do they say about it? The young employee thought for a moment. They say that everyone makes mistakes, but most people in power never acknowledge them, let alone try to fix them. They say you were different, that you chose accountability over ego. And that's why I wanted to work at Axiom, because it's a company that proved change is possible when people actually commit to it. She walked away, leaving Vivian alone with the photo and the weight of what it represented. Not redemption, not forgiveness. Just the honest accounting of what transformation looked like when it was real, messy, painful, uncertain, and absolutely necessary. Malik appeared beside her again. You know what the best part of this story is? What's that? It's not about you anymore. It's about what you helped build. The culture that outlasted your mistakes. The systems that protect people instead of harming them. The organization that proved companies can actually change if the people in power are willing to get out of the way. That's exactly what it should be about. They stood together, watching Axiom employees celebrate a future they'd built through collective effort and sustained struggle. And in that moment, Vivian Sterling finally understood what William the security guard had asked her 4 years ago. Would she do the work when nobody was watching? The answer was yes. Not because she'd become a saint, or because she'd earned forgiveness, but because the work had become who she was, woven into the fabric of her daily choices and priorities. She showed up for quarterly meetings with Malik and Simone. She mentored young leaders from underrepresented backgrounds. She called out bias when she saw it, even when it made people uncomfortable. She used her story as a cautionary tale and a roadmap for other leaders who were ready to examine their own systems. She did the work, continuously, imperfectly, but honestly. And 4 years after the handshake that never was, in the same gleaming lobby where everything had fallen apart, Vivian Sterling finally understood that transformation wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about having the courage to see who you'd actually been, accepting responsibility for the harm you'd caused, and choosing every single day to be different. One extended hand at a time, one honest conversation at a time, one uncomfortable truth at a time. Until the work became not a burden to carry, but simply the way forward. Not a performance for cameras or credit, but the actual substance of a life lived in alignment with what mattered. The party continued around her, filled with people whose lives had been changed not by her redemption, but by their own courage to demand better and stay long enough to see it built. And that, Vivian thought as she watched them celebrate, was exactly how it should be.